Hello, everybody. How we doing? Nice to see you all. Big night. I've been looking forward to this. Please like and share. Would really appreciate that. We'll get started here in just a couple minutes. Thank you, Deb. Appreciate that. Hi, Bunny. Hey, Anthony. How you doing, brother?
Hey, what's happening?
Dude. Oh, that's nice. I like that. Very
Right?
nice.
Hold on, though. Hold on. Wait, this is the best part. Check out the buttons.
Love that. It's a freaking guitar. Looks like a Gibson.
Yes,
Very
sir.
nice. Everybody, if you guys could please like and share, would really appreciate that. The way this is going to work tonight is we have another co-host that will be joining us shortly, Political Mom. So we're not going to do a typical panel like we've done in the past. Our guests this evening will come up one at a time. We will have Rolo, who is an immigration attorney and also a naturalized citizen, and we're also going to have Bobby, who is a Marine and also a retired and or former Border Patrol agent. So that's kind of how the conversations are going to go. We've got a bunch of questions that we're going to ask. There's a lot of people that have sent in a lot of questions. We'll try to get to all of them tonight if we can. But I want to encourage people that are in the chat, if you have questions, please send them our way. And then if you have a question that you really want to ask one of our guests, please request in the box. But we want this conversation to be serious because this is an important topic. So what we're talking about tonight is immigration and the U.S. border. By the way, Anthony, I don't know if you know this, but there's a border to our north as well.
What?
I know, right? Hard to believe. I know,
Oh,
dude.
wait a minute.
I'm
Is that
sorry.
is that where all the Canada gooses come from?
Correct. All the Canadian goose that shit on the golf courses that I play on. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And by the way, as the crow flies, which is a good old New England expression, as the crow flies, the Canadian border is 37 miles from my front door. So I'm not far away from that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think while we're getting people in, and again, please like and share the live, guys. Send it to as many friends and foes as possible. I really think this is going to be an educational opportunity for all of us. The opportunity that we have to sort of dispel a lot of sort of rumors, misinformation, false information. That's the goal tonight. So that's really what we want to that's what we want to focus on. So I want to encourage people to ask questions. I want to encourage people to engage. I want to encourage people to really take this opportunity to learn as much as possible. Because as we know, this topic will be with us. We know that it's a divisive issue. And what I like about our guests is that they're both very objective gentlemen, and they'll talk about this from a factual data perspective. Obviously, that they look at the border situation and immigration in general from different perspectives, which I think that's the point. And obviously, it's going to kind of get into politics because we're going to talk about, what's changed from one administration to the other over the years. And I think that that's kind of where this conversation will go tonight. So please, again, continue to like and share, you guys. I would really appreciate that. So I see Bobby. Bobby's in the chat box. We'll bring you up in a minute, brother. Also waiting on Chelsea. Just a couple of quick little stats that I was looking at, and I'll go back over this later. The border between the U.S. and Mexico is the 10th most traveled border in the world. Approximately 350 million documented crossings annually. The length is 1,954 miles, 4 border states: California, Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. There are 48 U.S.-Mexico border crossings. with 330 ports of entry. At these ports of entry, people trying to get into the U.S. are required to open their bags for inspection. I'm sure there's a few other things, and we'll ask our guests about that as well. Border crossings take place by road, by pedestrian walkway, by railroad, and by ferry. The Canadian border, the U.S.-Canadian border, by the way, is the longest international border in the world, 5,525 miles long. Two sections, of course, Canada's border with the contiguous United States, like the lower 48, as they say, and then one with Canada. The Binational International Boundary Commission deals with matters relating to marking and maintaining the boundary, and the International Joint Commission deals with issues concerning boundary waters. The land crossing, there are currently 119 legal land border crossings between the U.S. and Canada, 26 of which take place at a bridge or tunnel. Only 2 of the 119 crossings are one way. There are 6 roads that have unstaffed road crossings. I know where there's one of those. I'm just saying, just for public consumption, I'm just saying. They do not have border inspection services at those locations. Travelers are legally allowed to cross the border at those spots. Those that cross are then required to report to customs, which are stationed further within. So if you think about that, the U.S.-Canadian border is 3 times longer than the U.S.-Mexico border, but barely has twice as many border crossing locations. So we spend a lot of time talking about the southern border, obviously. That is a big sort of hot button topic, but we do have a border to our north as well. And a couple of other stats that I pulled today, specifically around this. This came directly from the U.S. Customs and Border Protection website. On a typical day in fiscal year 2022, they haven't updated the 2023 stats, but they processed 868,867 passengers and pedestrian. 263,000 come via international air. 58,549 passengers and crew arriving on a ship or a boat, and then 547,000 incoming land travelers. They conducted 6,068, and this is every day, 6,068 enforcement encounters nationwide between the ports of entry, 41 arrests of wanted criminals at U.S. ports of entry, and 1,152 enforcement encounters nationwide at ports of entry, including inadmissible migrants and expulsions. So that's a typical day. Yeah,
That's an insane set of numbers, right?
It is insane. I mean, 868,860. Well, 350 million cross annually. Obviously that's going to be both ways. Remember, we have international commerce that exists. We have people coming from Mexico to work and then going home. So we'll get into some more stats a little bit later.
Yeah.
We're gonna try to address a few things this evening. So again, I want to shout out to my mods. You guys are awesome. I appreciate that. We're gonna make sure that people give everyone an opportunity to ask their questions this evening. I just want to make sure that people are being respectful in the chat. This is for informational purposes. We will get into that a little bit later as we go. Did you have anything that you wanted to share before we kind of dig in a little bit, Anthony?
Yeah, I just want to bring up how absolutely insane the governor of Texas is to be defying the Supreme Court, thwarting federal authority, causing further dehumanization of people seeking migrant and asylum. The fact that this guy actually thinks that he has the ability and the right to tell not only the federal government what is their sole preview and the Supreme Court what they can do by putting up more wire. He's literally preventing the Border Patrol from doing their job. And yet the GOP keeps claiming that they're the party of law and order, that they back the blue. How do we square all of this up, right? Because to me, it's ridiculous on its face, and there's no actual way to describe the rank hypocrisy that's being really cast upon the state of Texas by its governor.
Yeah, it's exactly right. So what Anthony is referring to is that the Supreme Court came out earlier this week and said that they support the Biden administration's push to have Border Patrol agents helping with, removing the razor wire specifically in Texas. And the Supreme Court made that decision, and Governor Abbott in Texas is not only defying it, but he's adding more razor wire. So that is, again, it's a federal, it's an international boundary between two nations. States do not have the authority to determine the rules regarding international borders. Like you don't need a permission slip to drive from one state to another, but there are things that you need to drive from one country to another. For example, when I go to Canada from my state, when I come back across the border, it does not say welcome to Vermont first. It says welcome to the United States of America. Eventually it says Vermont. But yeah, exactly. So friends, if you guys could continue to bang on that like button, like and share, would really, really appreciate that. Please be generous to our panelists this evening. We really appreciate that. In particular, our guests. A couple more stats that I thought was interesting. On a typical day in fiscal year 2022, CBP seized 2,895 pounds of drugs. That's daily. $217,700 in illicit currency, and $8 million worth of products with intellectual property rights and violations. They also, CBP employs 63,843 men and women, 25,836 CBP officers, 2,600 agriculture specialists, 19,000 Border Patrol agents, 570 air interdiction agents or pilots, 364 marine interdiction agents, 363 aviation enforcement agents, and 1,100 trade personnel. So from our conversations with Bobby the last time, he said that we just could as many. I think his quote was, "Let's get as many as we can." so
Yeah.
we'll do that.
Yeah.
We'll
And
do
and
that.
and why is it, while we're on this subject, why is it that the GOP keeps limiting the funding for these agencies they supposedly support? Why do
Yeah,
they
I mean,
keep stripping out headcount for these agencies they supposedly support?
that's fair. I mean, again, an opportunity tonight to try to be as objective as we can. I think we should talk about it from that we need more staffing there, and then we can figure out
Well,
how to get to it. Right? Exactly. Yeah.
100%. We need at least a minimum of 10,000 more agents, and yet we're being acknowledged on one hand politically by a party saying yes, we need this, but then they turn around and they don't vote for it. So my
Right.
question is well, if we need something, if we are going to acknowledge that there are issues with immigration naturalization, there are issues with ports of entry, there are issues within this whole realm of people coming to the border, well, doesn't that require that we toss a little money for a solution?
Sure
Seems
does.
logical.
Hi, Chelsea. Anthony, I think Chelsea wants to turn Texas blue. I'm just saying. I mean, a little bird told me that I think she
As long
does.
as it doesn't impact the barbecue.
Fair enough.
That's
Ain't
my
gonna
only ask.
impact the barbecue. The barbecue's always the best in blue run cities, you know what I'm saying? Saying.
Terry
uh,
Black's in Austin as an example.
Perfect. Kansas City, Missouri, as an example.
There you go.
Thank you guys for
Yes.
joining, both of you for joining tonight. Chelsea, we were just kind of getting rolling. I see both Rollo and Bobby down in the chat area. I'll invite them up in just a second. Before we started, is there anything in particular that you're looking to learn this evening?
Particularly, I want to learn about how they operate as far as like processing people. I want to know how they count, how they have to project those numbers, what
Okay.
relationships are between them and the National Guard, because it's so conflicting, especially here in Texas, of like the different reports we get.
Okay. Yeah, and that question that you sent me, I think, is a good one
Yes.
about deportation and what that looks like, and is it economically feasible?
Yeah.
So again, folks, we're gonna try to crank this up. So please like and share. Let's drive as much traffic as we can, because these two guys are giving us their time this evening, and I think it's necessary that we acknowledge that. And I'm going to invite them both up now. So, gentlemen, thank you both for joining this evening. Rollo, Bobby, welcome, guys. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Really, really appreciate this. I want to first start with some introductions. If you don't mind, we'll do a little background. So I'll just ask each of you just to tell us a little bit about yourselves, what your your story, so to speak, and your relationship to immigration and the border. So Rollo, why don't you start?
Yeah, thank you. Can you guys hear me okay?
We got you,
Check,
brother.
check. Good. Yeah, well, my name is Rollo. Rolando is my real name, for those of you who don't know. I am an immigration attorney. Here, I practice in the area of Idaho in the Treasure Valley, in the Boise, Nampa, Caldwell, all that area there. I also do criminal defense. So I specialize in the intersectionality that happens between criminal law and immigration law and how the criminal laws affect immigrants who are not here as citizens differently than it affects regular people, right? Um, so it's a very intricate part of the law, and it's something that I'm very passionate about. Um, I started school late when I was 33. That's when I decided to go back to school after working odd jobs here and there in the construction, management, sales, all kinds of stuff. But then I decided to go back to school and, um, you know, hit go full throttle. I completed my undergrad in 2 years at the University of Utah, and then I graduated from law school here in Idaho. And so a total of five 5 years, 5.5 years or so. And my whole intent in getting my law license and becoming a practicing attorney was to practice immigration law specifically. And I've been blessed greatly with a great support with my wife, my family, and I understand my privileges and I use those privileges to the extreme as to help my community, my family, and anyone that I can. And at this point, I've gained sufficient knowledge to be able to share some of that knowledge with everyone here. My main intent here is to be objective as possible and supplying this information. Uh, I am completely transparent. All my clients who know me, that's one thing that I really like to be is transparent. So I like to disclose my bias. I lean left, right? I am more of a progressive. I believe in very strong opinions about that. But when it comes to the law and the processes of immigration, I try to keep that objective, and I don't like to argue opinions when it comes to that. That's a little bit about me. I have 3 kids, wife. I'm 9 out of 10 children. Guatemala, that's where I'm originally from. So that's a bit about me.
And you're a naturalized citizen, is that correct, Rollo?
That's correct. Yes,
Okay.
I got my green card when I was on my 12th birthday. Actually, we crossed the border in Laredo and got my green card. And I didn't become a naturalized citizen until I was 27.
Wow.
So yeah.
We'll unpack that a little bit. Thanks, man. I appreciate that. Bobby, welcome. Thanks for
Yeah,
joining.
thank you so much for having me. Real quick, I was a Border Patrol agent for almost 10 years. I left in late 2022, so I've been out about 15 months, somewhere around there. But essentially, laws haven't changed since then, so I'm very familiar with how the enforcement portion of it is. I could talk about Title 42 and Title 8. I could talk about the wall, everything that you guys have questions about. I'd be happy to assist you. But one of the reasons why I even wanted to come on here in the first place, one, I wasn't a big fan of TikTok. However, when I got on, I started listening to lives, and I heard a lot of misinformation. Mostly, I'm trying to stay apolitical here, but mostly from the right. So I went into their lives and I try to correct the record, and they don't like to have that record set. So I'm trying to find a location, and I found it with UFAX, to actually have a civil conversation so we can actually talk it out. We have an immigration lawyer here. We have somebody that is familiar with the enforcement side of it. Now, I am not a lawyer, but I am familiar with the law itself because I had to enforce it. I need to make a disclaimer. Although I am a former Border Patrol agent, I am not representing Border Patrol.
Fair enough.
I'm going to speak from anecdotal experience. There are some things that I cannot talk about, specifically things that are to remain within Border Patrol, like the processes, types of equipment. I'll let you know if I can't answer that specifically for that reason. I can generalize it, okay? But other than that, I'm open to all questions, whether it's from the left or right. I'm here to help.
That's great. Thank you both very, very much. I think the way that we should, and I'm hoping that we could do this tonight, as I know that Anthony's got questions, I've got questions, Chelsea's got questions, and we want to open it up to people in the chat and or people who will request to come up and ask legitimate questions. Are you guys cool with that? Awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Well, let's start with a big one. Is the border open? Who wants to take it?
I could take it.
Go ahead, Bobby.
All right, so I mentioned this in the other lives. I have two definitions, right? One, we consider the geographic location of our border. Whether or not you put a wall up, to me, it's still going to be open. We're never going to be able to stop the flow. That's just the way it is. The cartels are very crafty. They're going to get around whatever it is we put in place. So to me, a border wall doesn't really make sense. When we talk about law itself, there isn't really an open border policy that Biden has pushed. He is currently using Title 8. And in the previous administration, we used Title 42, and there are big differences. And one is a code that holds those migrants that cross into the country accountable, as opposed to Title 42, where we give just an expulsion. Now, when we use either or, there's some ramifications when we use those types of codes, right? And we can talk about that if you guys have any questions from that point.
That's awesome. Thank you very much. So by definition, the border is not open, never has been open, and as you described it, there are a wall and or structures in general don't do much.
Yeah,
the reason that you just described. Okay. Chelsea, Anthony, you guys have a question? I've got a list, so don't feel obligated.
You can start with your list, and then
okay,
we'll go from there.
Thank you. Another topic that I think there's a lot of confusion around is asylum. So Rollo, maybe you can sort of talk us through that. I mean, you can get as in depth or as high up as you want, but I think there's an opportunity here for people to really understand what it is, if you don't mind. Thank you, sir.
Sure. I mean, we can start high level and then go in depth as much as we need to, right? When it comes to asylum, there's a lot of misconception. A lot of people like to conflate a couple different legal statuses in the United States. For example, they like to conflate refugees with asylum seekers and then asylees, right? And they're similar but completely different. So, for example, we can start with refugees. A lot of people think, and that's where the misinformation comes around. They say, hey, we have all these asylum seekers coming in and they're getting cell phones, laptops, housing, stipends. I've heard up to like $30,000 a month stipends and, all sorts of information, food stamps, and they're just giving them all these things. And here, us US citizens, we're not getting anything. And that's where the strife comes in, but it's basically a lot of misinformation. So to combat that, I need everyone to deconflate asylum seekers.
I like that word. I like that word a lot.
Yeah, asylum seekers from refugees, from asylees. Refugees are people who come to the U.S. with a legal status as a refugee. In order to become a refugee, you have to be from a qualifying country. Mostly your country has to be shred to pieces by foreign powers, and there has to be a lot of strife in your country.
So to put that into recent context, although citizens of Syria, Afghanistan, Israel, Gaza, places like that, where obviously hotspots all over the world, but those people seeking to come to the U.S. would have refugee status?
Yeah, and I'll talk about that. Yeah.
Thank you.
they do come with a refugee status. A lot of people, places from Africa, we had a lot of turmoil in Africa. So how they do that is they have to flee their country and go to a third country, a safe third country. And if you look at it, they have to be there for a long time while they apply for refugee status. And it could be years. It could be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years until they get vetted and they get entered into a lottery. In that lottery, they can't pick where to go. They can't say I want to go to the U.S. or I want to go to Germany. So they kind of in the lottery, and then they get designated to different countries. The U.S. we take on refugees, and then they come over, and once they're approved and vetted after many years, then they come here and they do get help. I mean, it makes sense. You're coming here with a different language, a different culture, a different country, with nothing to your name. So the government does help them. They give them a stipend. I think it's about 8 to 9 months stipend, with other helps. They're assigned social workers that help them find jobs, get training. You can become barbers. I mean, some schooling, so that you can, once you're done with the period of help, then you're on your feet, right? And you're not a public charge. So that's where that happens, and it makes complete sense.
Mm-hmm.
Those are refugees, and it's a legal status. Once you're here as a refugee, after a year, you can apply for a green card, what they call it, a legal permanent resident status. After being here as a resident for 5 years, then you become a U.S. citizen. So refugees, you have a pathway to citizenship. So it's great.
Okay.
The other one that we have to look at is asylees, right? But before I get to the asylee status, you first have to come here as an asylum seeker, right? And in my profession, words matter.
Mm.
You can't conflate asylees with asylum seekers. If you do that, then you have to assume that asylees and asylum seekers being the same, then they have a legal status and they do qualify for certain stipends, certain, government help to get them on their feet. Not all of them, and I'll tell you why, right? But you can't do that. So first, you have to come here seeking asylum. Now, you are not, and I repeat, you cannot ask for asylum in your home country. You cannot ask for asylum in an embassy. You cannot ask for asylum in a third country. So, for example, if I flee Guatemala, where I'm from, and then I flee to Mexico and I go to the embassy in Mexico and say, I want to seek asylum for the US, they're going to turn me away.
Right.
And there's no other way that I can seek refugee status either, because my country is not war torn right now,
Mm.
right? There's just a lot of crime and a lot of other issues that my country suffers from, but not the qualifying situations that would qualify my country for a country that its members would qualify for refugee status. Therefore, I have to come to the US. And here's where the misinformation starts getting really bad. A lot of people say, okay, if you come seeking asylum, you have to go through a port of entry, right? And that is 100% false. In order to seek asylum in the US, the only thing that the law requires you is to be on US soil. That's it. That is the requirement. So whether I cross here through a port of entry or I hop the fence, swim the river, go around it, underneath it, whatever, as long as I am on US soil, then I would turn myself to a gentleman like Mr. Bobby and say, I need asylum. He will take me into custody. He will process me. He will fingerprint me. He will ask me very specific questions. And then he will start my process as an asylum seeker to see if I even qualify, right? At this point, then I don't know if Bobby did this kind of things. I think he did. He told me that he interviewed thousands of people, what is called a credible fear interview.
Mhm.
And you have to have passed the credible fear interview. And that fear is that you have to fear past persecution or fear of future persecution based on certain protected statuses: race, religion, national origin, political opinion, uh, membership in a particular social group. And all of these things have so many things, whether you qualify or not. All that Mr. Bobby would have to do at a point is determine whether my fear is credible. So if I come here and I say, look, I'm from Guatemala, my family is very poor, we have a lot of crime, and I'm coming here to the US to seek asylum. Bobby, would you let me in at that point?
No.
No.
The majority don't actually get asylum.
It's over 90%, correct? Like over
Yeah, we'll
90% do not.
It's more like 97%.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll get to that right now. Right?
That don't get asylum, 97% that don't get asylum. Thank God.
Right. So then Bobby, his job is to see whether my fear, based on those grounds, are credible. If I say anything else that doesn't qualify under that, then he's not supposed to let me in. Sometimes they do let him in based on other reasons, humanitarian, kids. There's other ways that, people do get let in. But if you don't pass that credible fear interview, then you can't qualify for the beginning of the asylum process. If you do, then you get let in. You get paroled in, or you just get let in, right? And then, but you have to be let in with a sponsor, someone who has been here previously, family member, friend, someone who's going to be financially responsible for you while you get on your feet, right? So then there's more misinformation. I mean, that's it. Nobody is going to, okay, they will give me a cell phone sometimes because it's a tracking device. It's not so I can chat online all day with babes, right? It's not so I can chat on TikTok either. It's just a tracking device.
Okay.
Right. That's what that phone is. It's cheaper than getting one of those ankle monitors, I would argue, right? Or the same.
I think that's a really, I want to call that out a second, because that's, again, a source of a lot of misinformation, that people are thinking that they're given iPhones, they're given state-of-the-art technology. It's literally just a device that enables them to confirm their court dates, tracking device, like you said, in it, and that's really about it, right?
Right. I mean, you have to
Okay.
take a selfie every week and then send it to to the person in charge of your case. So
Gotcha.
it's very
So
interactive.
you got to take a selfie and then send it to your case manager or whatever that would be. Interesting.
Yeah.
Anthony has a question.
Just a real quick point to interject here. One of the things that we do is we always check facts, right? So if anyone is listening in, go to uscis.gov and you can look under the humanitarian section, and it actually has questions and answers, credible fear screening. So everything that was just said not only is 100% accurate, obviously, but if you don't believe me, if you don't believe Rollo, if you don't believe Bobby, please actually go to the website that our government created, and you will see that step by step, which I was like, holy crap, Rollo's done this so many times, he actually looks like the Q&A section of this website. So that was awesome, because you also just eliminated a whole bunch of my questions. So thank you, because this was really cool. So sorry for the interjection, but a little levity, humor was needed also.
Agreed.
I'd like to say something about that. Now, Rollo perfectly explained the process, right? Once they come into our custody and we go, it is a requirement for Border Patrol agents to ask if they have credible fear. Here's the problem, is that that's in a perfect world, right? We have there's so many people that are coming through, these agents, right? Keep in mind, this is from my anecdotal experience. The majority of my station are Republicans, and they go to the station with their Let's Go Brandon canteens, which is a violation of the Hatch Act.
Interesting.
Right? A lot of them, when they're supposed to ask those questions, they're not actually asking those questions. And here's where I get into the nitty gritty.
The questions for the CFI, Bobby, is that what you're talking about? Okay.
Asylum. Gotcha. Well, so we're supposed to ask them, regardless of who we're coming into contact with, right? But we have people that are in the cells, and they don't like personally going to each person and interviewing them, because we have a lot of people to deal with. So what do? I've seen them myself filling in the documentation for the migrant, And all they ask them is, what is their father's name and what is their mother's name? Because we wouldn't have that information. They fill in the questionnaire for them, and guess what happens? They don't actually get a chance to claim asylum. So they don't get the
Interesting.
paperwork to go into an asylum claims office to talk to an asylum officer. So there's a problem there. So in a perfect world, that the way Rolo mentioned it, that's the way it's supposed to be. But does it happen? I'm here to tell you that it doesn't.
Can I
Now I
ask
know
a
you. Go ahead, Chelsea, please.
my question is, what happens when they don't pass the test? Like, what is the process for people that don't pass?
I'll start from the beginning of the enforcement portion of
Why
it.
don't
Okay?
hang on one second with that because
Okay.
I wanted Rolo to finish up what he was
Okay.
describing there because I
Okay.
think we're in there. I'm sorry, Chelsea.
No, you're no, you're all
we'll go
good.
right back. We'll go right back to that because I think that's important that we finish this piece. So thank you.
Yeah. So I think we do put a pin on it because I think it's very important information, Bobby, and I do want to touch base with you personally because that can help some of my clients.
Yeah,
But
I'm here to
yeah,
help.
so we have the asylum, right? Once they get let in, then they have 1 year to the day so that they can file an I-589.
Mm-hmm.
That is the asylum application. I like to leave it as bare bone as possible, answer the questions that are necessary, and then you file that, right? That's so an attorney can later on review it and say, hey, what do we need to add on this, right? But we'll talk, I'll get there in a minute. Once you file the I-589, there's a clock that starts running. Once that clock hits 180 days, then you can apply for a work permit and a social security card. So they give you a work permit, social security card, so you can pay taxes, so that you can work, so you can have a license, you can pay insurance, purchase cars, etc. While your asylum claim goes through the process. Now, an asylum claim can take anywhere from 3 to 5 to 7 to 10 years, depending, right? And
Mm.
one thing to remember is that immigration law and immigration courts are not Title III courts. They are administrative courts. So they're not held to the same standard as the Title III courts. They are, they're not even called, well, they are judges, but specifically immigration judges. They're not regular judges, right? So once you go, once you get set for a master calendar hearing to see how your process is going, then they'll set it for an individual hearing, which would be similar to a bench trial, where it's you, your client, the immigration judge, the IJ, and then DHS counsel, right? And then hopefully you get a good attorney. They're gonna do all the heavy lifting up front. They're gonna present to the court all of the possible evidence about your asylum claims on how you qualify and why you qualify for asylum. And some of those packets could be 500, 600, they could be very thick
Wow.
when you research country conditions, declarations, all the possible things that you could submit to a court. And then, in my opinion, because of how convoluted the immigration laws are, you're going to be denied, right? Even if you have a credible fear, even if the moment you return to your country, you're going to be unalived, it doesn't matter, right? You're more than likely going to be denied unless you have a very strong political opinion where you can, claim that you hate Maduro, or Cuba, wherever the pattern that I see is wherever the US has political strife or conflict, then the people that get benefited that come here because they can claim political opinion and that somehow they oppose the government, right? In Mexico, we don't have that. Well, I'm not from Mexico, but my Mexican brothers and sisters, they have to claim persecution based on the cartels, on groups that the government is not able or is unwilling to protect you from, right? And you have to go through a bunch of different things that you have to show. And The problem with this is even if you fulfill all the requirements, you have to have good moral character, you have to pass credibility. The judge has to determine whether he thinks you're credible or not.
Mm.
And at the end of things, he could say, well, based on my discretion, because I don't think he's a good person, not because he doesn't have good moral character, but because he did a few things that I don't like, you know, very discretionary, then he could say, I am going to reject this based on my discretion. And then on appeal, I would have to argue that the judge abused his discretion, which any attorneys out there know that proving that a fact finder abused his
Wow.
discretion is next to impossible
Mhm.
because the appellate courts are going to give a lot of deference to the fact finding courts, right?
It could be a coin flip for the judge, is what you're saying. Okay,
There's no uniformity in my opinion, right? I mean,
gotcha.
I practice in the Ninth Circuit. In Boise, the jurisdiction in Boise, it was handed over to the 10th Circuit courts judges in Salt Lake City. And a lot of times they confuse 10th Circuit immigration law with 9th Circuit immigration law. And a lot of times, they denied of it. Well, what I'm trying to get at is that if you are, in these types of courts, you have a 90 something percent chance of these guys denying your claim. Whereas if
Okay,
you're in San Francisco or in New York, now your odds are better. You're in the high 80s, maybe,
okay, okay.
right? But when it all balances it out, Bobby, you're correct. It's in the high 95s and above, 97%. That's why, like, a vast majority of my practice is appellate work. So I try to find ways in which the judges erred, where they messed up, where they misinterpreted the law or didn't apply something or didn't consider all the factors or, whatever it is. But then I have an uphill battle because I have to deal with the Board of Immigration Appeals. And if you guys know a little bit of the history of the Board of Immigration Appeals under the last administration, a lot of those judges just flat out quit. And who got to appoint a lot of those judges? Trump, right?
Right,
So again,
right.
an uphill battle. And
Sure.
then if they side with the immigration judge, then my client loses. I have the opportunity to appeal to the circuit courts. The problem is that because it's an administrative court, the Ninth Circuit or the Tenth Circuit, they don't really have jurisdiction to review these cases, right? They really don't. There's a few ways in which we could establish jurisdiction for the Ninth Circuit or 10th Circuit to actually review the BIA's decision. And it's a very small window. And a lot of the times, the Ninth Circuits or the circuits, they just reject it and say, no, we don't have jurisdiction over this, or we're not going to even see it, review it. There's no judicial review when it comes to that. And then it gets kicked back to the BIA, and then that's the end of it. Once you get finality, then the final order of deportation becomes effective, and
Okay.
then that's when my ICE friends come in and they can
They do a
deport my
detention
client.
Got
amount, yeah.
Gotcha. So let's go. I'm sure we'll go back to that because there's a lot of things that I want to follow up on. But I want to go back to Chelsea's question because it seems like we're at that point now to talk about what happens if you don't pass.
Yeah.
So Chelsea, want to ask that question again?
Yeah, what happens when you don't pass the test?
I could start from the enforcement side, and if you want Rolo to follow up with that. So from the enforcement side, remember, whenever we come into contact with somebody and we arrest them, we're already keeping a mental note of what each individual migrant is doing. So if they were assaultive or whatever the case may be, that goes in their file, right? And typically, whenever we go and capture somebody in the dark, they get scared, they may flail around, and then an agent can come in and say, oh, well, they hit me, right? So that's one thing they put into their file, and that goes with them into court. Now, when we go in and we interview the person, like I said before, it's required by agents to ask them if they have credible fear. Do you fear returning to your home country? Is somebody going to harm you or so forth, right? And typically they would say yes. I would say 60% of them will say yes. The ones that just want to go back to Mexico and come right back the next day, they'll say, no, I don't want to, right? but those are just makeup percentages, right? That's just from my personal experience. But if as an agent, if he specifically asks them if you have credible fear, and they don't show to the agent, reasonable suspicion or whatever they want to call it, if they can't prove, like if I ask them, who do you fear? Is it somebody specific in Guatemala, for example? Can you give me a good example? A lot of the agents are not processing them as asylum seekers, right? Because they feel like they don't meet the standard. I will say this one point. It's not Border Patrol's job to determine their asylum. It is their job to ask the question and set the paperwork up in their file, and then send it off to an asylum officer. That is not our job. And that's where Border Patrol is failing in the system, because they're not doing their job correctly in most cases. So, Roller, do you want to deal with the aftermath?
One quick question I have about that.
Yeah.
So, Bobby, are you saying that Border Patrol are making those decisions and they shouldn't be making those decisions
Yeah.
in a situation like that?
So I've actually had conversations with other agents, and they tell me, why are you processing incredible fear? And I said, because it's part of my job. You're supposed to ask. In order to get them out the door faster, they're just filling in the blanks and then sending them off without even asking for asylum. And keep in mind, there's a language barrier, and a lot of the agents don't even speak Spanish. So how are they interviewing them? So they're basically just filling in the information, having the migrant sign the documentation. They don't know what they're signing, and then they send them off. And it messes up their asylum claims. Definitely.
I can see what you talked about earlier when you talked about how some of the Border Patrol agents that you work with, obviously doing the best that they can, but sometimes their political affiliation perhaps might influence the decisions that they make at that moment, just because of a lot of the rhetoric. I don't want to make that assumption, but it seems like that might be logical.
I think there's a good correlation between the two. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that. Just real quick, we're gonna start to invite some guests up, but I just want to offer some more information. So Forbes did a study recently about the economic impact of immigrants. 1 in 8 U.S. residents is considered an immigrant. Immigrants paid over $600 billion in taxes in 2022, and 22% of all U.S. entrepreneurs are immigrants. So interesting. So, Rolo, did you have a follow-up to Bobby's component there?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to finish that off and close that loop there. So once the CBP officer asks those questions, they get turned over to an asylum officer, and then they follow up on that credible fear. At that point, when I was in law school, I would volunteer to listen in to those, interviews. Anyone can do it. Just to like be in there and have like a second eye, and we have the right to do that, kind of like a third eye right there. And if they fail, then they have one opportunity to appeal the officer's decision before an immigration judge, right? And a lot of people hire me for that. So then I go in there, I review everything, see if I can submit more documentation. But a lot of the times they're going to go with whatever the officer found. And that's the end of it. Now they can ask for an expedited removal if they don't have any previous problems or anything, and if they're eligible under the law for an expedited removal, then they can just move, or they get issued a deportation order. So a lot of people just get a final deportation order right there and then, and that's the end of it. They don't even get to come in.
Somebody just pinged me in my text for a question specifically around what you're just talking about. Why is it not the law that there's an interpreter there? Or is it a law that there should be an interpreter there?
So it's policy.
Interesting.
Border Patrol agents out of the academy, they take tests, right? And if they fail the initial Spanish, am I skipping? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, no.
We got you. Yeah.
Okay. So at the Border Patrol station, the academy, they have to pass a test. If they don't, then they stay at the academy longer to learn just the most basic Spanish, right?
Gotcha.
Where are you from? Where are you headed? How long were you going to stay here? Things like that, right?
Okay.
So there's just a number of questions that they have to answer or ask, and one of those is asylum. But they don't necessarily, once they leave the academy, it doesn't mean they know Spanish, right? So there's an interpretation issue there, and I think Rolo, if you really wanted to look into that, I can tell you firsthand that some of the agents that are processing, they don't know Spanish. So there's a big issue there, obviously.
So
And then
I
you have
was
another issue like my compatriots, who a lot of them speak mam, poco mam, cachiquel, quechí.
Yeah,
Ooh, right.
I mean, what is that?
dialect.
Dialects.
Yeah,
Sure.
there's a lot of
Lots of
dialect in
dialects.
Guatemala. Yeah,
Right.
for sure.
Folks, if I could ask everybody to continue to like and share the live, would really, really appreciate that. This has been great so far. Thank you very much. Chelsea, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah,
Or everybody,
somebody pinged
okay.
me and asked what the stats are that they're all being vetted. So like a lot of the speculation from Republicans especially is that like nobody's being vetted, like that they're all just coming in and stuff. Like what is the stats that you can estimate?
The ones that we have in our custody, they are 100% vetted. We have to process them. We have to check their backgrounds. There's different systems that we use in order to check the backgrounds. They can give us a false name and we'll still figure out exactly who they are. That I can't speak to personally. Well, in that regard, I can't tell you how. But they do get vetted. The ones that don't get vetted necessarily, I would say, no, Title 42, they still get vetted because we still have to get their demographics and things like that. So when they come through the Border Patrol station, they are checked 100%.
Cool. Interesting. That actually answers about 3 questions that I was going to ask. So thanks for that. We have some guests that have requested. Anthony, do you have a question, or should I invite somebody up? Okay. All right. So you guys ready to take some questions from the audience, as they say?
Let's do it.
And
All right. Let's rock
and
on.
that's if they come through the ports of entry, right? Because a lot of people are saying like, oh look, 10 million people are coming through without getting vetted. So a lot of the speculation is just like that's
Well, I can speak to that real quick.
okay.
Whether you come in through a port of entry or not through a port of entry, if you're seeking asylum, you have to turn yourself into CBP, right? So then you get vetted. Now the problem, I might deviate a little bit here, but the problem with coming into the port of entry, even though it's the best way to do it, it is extremely metered, right? So they don't put a streamline or a system to have, hey, if you're seeking asylum, step on this side and then we'll walk you through to the detention center and we'll process you there. They want to vet you at the border and they can only do so much each day. And you have to set up an appointment through CBP One. It's an application that you have to download. And then that CBP One kind of schedules you when you can show up at the port of entry. And that could take months, right? Who has the resources to stay at the border town infested with crime and a lot of dangers, families, months waiting to come in through the border, through the ports of entry, right? If you get it in, then you're awesome. You don't violate the illegal entry laws, specifically 8 USC 13, 25, 26, and 27, where if you don't cross through a port of entry, you can be charged with breaking the law and coming in violation of this code. Right, and that's
But you can
federal law.
still claim asylum, right? You can still request asylum
Yeah,
even though you do that, right?
Whether you violate 8 USC code, you can still claim asylum. It doesn't disqualify you from claiming asylum. What it does is it puts you a little bit more risk, right?
Gotcha.
So that's the problem, and that's why even though the ports of entry, that's how it should be done. I'm not excusing that people don't do it that way. It's just the U.S. makes it an impossibility most of the time to do it the right way, and they push
Gotcha.
people to do irregular migration.
Right.
Thank you for that. Warner, thanks for joining tonight. Do you have a question for our awesome guests?
Absolutely, and again, thank you guys for being up here, and really appreciate this. This is very informative. I shared a couple of days ago, and I'm not gonna harp on it because it's not really relevant. But I had shared with facts that my brother-in-law is an immigration judge, and so he lives on the other side of the country, so we don't get to see him that often. But I wanted to sit in on some of what he does for a living and just sit in the back and just kind of listen. And so my first question or more validation is in terms of what I witnessed, and I only attended four days of it. But I'm looking for affirmation on my first question, which is what I noticed after they went through. These were initial hearings. These weren't actual. It was just the first time meeting in front of my brother-in-law. But what I noticed at the end of that particular session was when my brother-in-law, working with the clerk and the calendar, assigned the next court date. The reaction from the person seeking asylum was something that I did not expect, and that was they were shocked at how long it was going to take. I even saw some of them starting to tear up, putting their face in their hands. And I think it goes into a little bit of maybe some of the misnomers about these people that they want to move on with their lives. And they cannot believe that it's scheduled out 2.5, 3, 4 years out just for that next hearing date. So I just wanted to see if you had some comments on that of what I experienced. Again, it was limited, but just to see these human beings reacting that way of how long it's going to take for them to get through this process and move on with their lives. That's my first question.
I can speak to that.
Thank you, Warner.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you go to an individual hearing, a master calendar hearing, Warner, that's what you experience when people come in and just kind of is their first checkup, right, at the courts. To get to the individual hearing, you're probably waiting for about a year or so, 6 months to a year, just to get to the individual hearing. Once you get to the individual hearing, if you don't have an attorney, then they're like, we'll give you time to hire an attorney. And they'll schedule you again for another individual hearing, another 6 months to a year, maybe more, right? Once you show up with an attorney, then you're taken more serious, because immigration law is very difficult. And then they'll set you up for individual hearing. Sorry, I said master calendar hearing, and then the last one is individual hearing, which would be equivalent to like a bench trial, right? It's not a jury trial. It's just the DHS attorney, the immigration judge, your client, and yourself, and then the judge determines, whether you grant asylum or not. And yeah, that can take a long time. Now, a lot of people say, and I'll say this, a lot of people say, well, let's get more immigration judges. That way we can process these people a lot faster as a solution. I'll tell you, as an immigration attorney, I say, no, please no. I like this system to be lethargic and slow. Why? Because I know the end result. And Bobby, 97% of the people, if they were to be processed within a year, they would be deported within a year because they're not going to win.
Right.
Does that make sense? So what we do as immigration attorneys is like, okay, well, let's play the system. The system lays the rules. We'll benefit our clients as much as possible. So we like it to be lethargic. If I didn't want it to be lethargic is if I knew, as in criminal law, that the outcome can be, very determinative and you either win, plea, or lose, right? But in this case, I want it to be lethargic so that I can go through the whole process and people can remain here, working, contributing to society, doing everything they can for 7, 10 years, 15 years, and then get deported.
Yeah.
Bobby, did you
if I can
want to add something? Yeah, please do.
Yeah, so this is where the enforcement and then the law side of it with the immigration lawyers such as yourself, Rolo, we kind of differ a little bit in that regard. Because as the enforcement portion of it, I would suggest more immigration judge because of the opposite of what you just said. Now, I'm not taking political sides, but if we're trying to relieve the pressure off the system itself, we need to have more immigration judges because as a law enforcement official, I wouldn't want them to continue to be in the U.S. illegally longer. Now, I'm not saying I don't want immigration. That's not what I'm saying. But to relieve the pressure off the border itself, just my personal opinion, more immigration judges is important to have because I think there's less than 700 And Rolo's correct. If I was a lawyer, I'd want to defend as he should. It's his job to defend migrants, and I think that's a noble job. I think he should be. But from the perspective of law enforcement, to relieve some of the pressure and to get that immigration going through a little bit quicker, we need more judges, and that's just my personal opinion, right? So
Yeah, no, I wouldn't disagree completely with you, right? The only reason why I wanted lethargic is because I know that if we do this fast, then
they just
you
automatically get
know,
out.
you come here and you're
Right.
out.
Right.
You
Makes
spend
sense.
thousands of dollars, which in the currency of my country could equivalent to hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? If I need to pay back these loans of how much I paid someone, took out some really uh, dangerous loans from dangerous people just to like leave the country, and now I have to go back, and I didn't even get to work for a full year,
Right.
And the only thing I would change on the rhetoric that on what you said, Bobby, is that they're not here illegally, right? They're seeking asylum, so they have
Sure.
a form of status because they are given work permits and social security cards,
Right.
so they can
Mm.
pay taxes, contribute, while the whole system, while they go through the system. But I understand what you're saying.
It's like
You know,
it's like the ultimate catch-22 because you
Right.
guys we want the process to be more efficient, but yet you guys with that 97% denying rate, and you obviously know what's going to happen inevitably down the road. So it's interesting. Warner, did you have a follow-up question? And I want to let somebody else come up.
I did, yeah. So I wanted to see if you could address kind of one of the misnomers, rumors, etc., that I've heard. Maybe this is more for you, Bobby, and I think you kind of already addressed it a little bit. But there's kind of this misnomer that the people that are seeking asylum, they know the game. They know when you start questioning them, what are the canned answers to say to get that asylum status once they are, once they come across the border. Can you kind of talk about that? Is that true?
Yes. So it is very true. So when we arrest people, in their pockets when we're searching them, they already have a little packet with like a baggie full of information, and it's since they already understand the process, they have an address in the United States that they can claim as a family, like a family member in the United States. So if I'm going to give them a WNTA because they're claiming asylum, which is a warrant of arrest notice to appear, we set them up with a court date at the Border Patrol station, and if they have an address to go to, then we'll send them off with ICE to their location, and they have to wait there until they get to their court date. So yes, that is true. Your answer is 100% correct.
I had heard that from my brother-in-law, so I wanted to ask you
may
guys.
may I ask a clarifying question on that?
Yeah.
Are you asking whether asylum seekers get coached so that they know how to lie in order to gain entry in their credible fear interview, or what specifically is it that you're asking?
Warner, I think that was to you.
Yeah, Warner.
Oh, I'm sorry. And so my was very vague about it, but what he said is they know they talk. They know the specific questions that are going to be asked, and they have canned answers to respond to play the game. That's really all that he said on that subject. But I wanted to hear your point of view of it.
And
Okay,
thank you, Warner.
so
If you could drop down and listen, I appreciate that, brother. Thank you very much.
Very good.
all right,
Thank you, guys. Take care.
thanks for
Thanks again. Bye
clarifying
bye.
that.
Thank you, sir.
I mean, I think that's a little bit subjective, right? Because I am not going to deny that some people are going to come here already like coached in the law on what to say. I mean, I help people do that because I ask them, well, what is your situation? And they very well may have a credible fear, right? But they don't know that. If they don't know what to say, then they're going to come here and say, I want better job, right? And then they're not going to let in. That does not mean that they don't have a credible fear
Right.
back home. So my
Right.
job as an
Right.
attorney is to ask a lot of questions, process it through all the stuff that I know, and then say, well, you probably shouldn't say that you're coming here just to get a better job, because I know they're not going to go through. But you told me that you were kidnapped. You told me that the cartel beat the crap out of you and like forced you to do this and that, or you know what I'm saying. So then I'm like, look, don't mention the whole job thing, because or like, oh, there's so much crime in my country. That's not gonna fly. What you need to say is let them know that yes, you fear persecution. Yes, and I tell them, yes, they're gonna persecute me. Why? Because that is a legal term. I fear persecution if I return because I was kidnapped. I was a victim of SA. I was a victim of this and that. And if I go back to my country, then the likelihood that these people are going to find me, torture me, do whatever, is very likely. So I have also fear of future persecution, and this is why.
Got
So,
it.
the framing, I'm not saying that he meant to frame it a certain way, but,
Sure.
coming from the IJ, I respect a lot of them, but they're not my friends, right? And some I don't respect. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
um, then the
Fair.
framing is, yeah, these people are getting coached. Now I had to do an appeal, and I had to call out this specific immigration judge that said on the record, hey, these people, first they come and claim something, then they speak to this ALA attorneys, that's a group I belong to, the immigration, national immigration, attorneys everywhere. They speak to these attorneys, and then they get coached, and all of a sudden their claim changes. That's just not right. Blah 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 blah. And he started criticizing the work of
Mm,
the attorneys, and then I'm like, well, you can't deny based on your opinion of whether an attorney needs to do his job, ask questions, and then tell people, hey, this is a valid claim. This is not. Does that make
gotcha.
sense?
Gotcha. It does. It does. Interesting. Go ahead, Bobby. And then I'm going to let Tyler ask his question.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Bobby.
so as a Border Patrol agent, when I was working, we were well aware of YouTube videos from foreign countries that put videos on there. They do coach through social media. Now, up front, from
Mm,
the very first apprehension to the time they get to our station, when I check them, the majority of the people that are in our custody, they have little paper baggies and it has specific information that we need as agents, and they already have it ready to go. And the reason why they have in a paper baggie or a plastic baggie is to protect it from the elements because they need that, right? But after that, I can't say that they're going to be coached so well that they can get through the interview process with an asylum claims officer. I think
gotcha.
that the information that they have is just to get to the officer, like to get through us, right? They still got
Understood.
to go through a
Okay.
stringent process.
Anthony, before we go to Tyler.
Yeah, thanks. This is awesome, everybody. Administratively, please continue to tap the screen and share the live. Make mention of that. Now, here's an interesting perspective. So I've been listening, and as Fax knows, I always have my little electronic notebook with me. I'm constantly writing and typing and checking things out. Here's a semantics statement. Instead of referring it to coaching, why don't we just freely admit that most people who don't come to the United States often can read, write, and speak in multiple languages? And because all of this information is free on what we like to call the interwebs, even if there is coaching, which I would not like to say coaching, it's dissemination of freely obtainable, publicly facing information,
Yep,
which is legal.
yep,
Coaching sounds slightly nefarious and
Yeah.
askew of the law, when in fact, we actually do encourage people seeking asylum
right.
or seeking refugee status to understand how things work here to speed up the process. So I just wanted to point out that lovely little
Well said.
irony that
Well
here
said.
we are
Good point.
forgetting the facts. But anyway, I
Well said.
digress. Tyler, what's
I
up,
appreciate
brother?
it. Tyler, yeah, what's on your mind, brother? Thanks for your patience.
Hey, Facts Matter. I've been watching you for months, and I love the work that you do up here and stuff. And I support what you do here. I am a Democrat here.
Thank you.
Is it all right if I screen record here?
Yeah, sure.
So Rolo, just to make sure, you are an immigration attorney, right? And
Yeah.
Bob, you are a former Border Patrol agent, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Awesome. Here, I read through Title 8 here and stuff, and I try to give factual information here.
Hmm.
So I'm going to try to give it in two questions. So question one, what policies have changed? Because people like to say this whole border crisis is the Biden border crisis, and it's not really the president's fault. What policies have changed to cause this issue?
Well, if I may, Rolo, on the enforcement side, Title 8, of course, we use depending on what they're amenable to, right? So if it's their first entry into the United States, we'll use Title 8, USC 1325. And if they have a reinstate, if they had a previous order of removal from an immigration judge and they come back again, we'll use 8 USC 1326. And what that is, it's an actual penalty, right? So we put a charge code as if like an ER, an expedited removal. We can charge them with a misdemeanor for entry without admission, or inspection actually is the word. As opposed to answer your question, when I was working under Trump, we used Title 42, right? Title 42 is an expulsion. It's not an immigration law. It's not a code that we put into their file jacket. It's an expulsion. And we can round up 100, 200 people at a time, just get their basic information and send them right back to Mexico, regardless of where they're from. And guess what happens? They come right back the next day because there's no penalty.
Right.
So the other issue that we have with Title 42 is that because we're sending them back to Mexico, we're not sending them back to Guatemala, we're not sending them back to Argentina, wherever they're from. So typically the people that are coming over are very poor. They can only afford to come here once. So a Title 42 is just a round robin. And we count every apprehension. So if we catch them twice in one day, guess what? It counts as 2 apprehensions. So,
Even though it's the same person.
even though it's the same person, will count as an apprehension, right? And I've done
So it kind of sounds like you're more favorable with the Title 8 system that we have compared to Title 42 because of the fact that Title 42 they were able to come back every single day. With Title 8, you catch them here and then you send them back.
But keep in mind, Tyler, and very good questions, by the way. Title 8, you have to individually process the migrants instead of getting a group of them and just sending them right off with just the basic information. Now I'm spending like 2 or 3 hours just on one migrant because I have to interview them, I have to ask them questions, I have to fingerprint them, go through the whole 9 yards, right? So it takes more time and it does back up the system a little bit more, but it's more stringent. It's more of a
Awesome.
Yeah.
The other question I have, because
Can I
the
just
other question.
chip in
Oh, yep,
before
go
you
ahead.
ask the other question, Tyler? Yeah, and just to clarify, right? Title 8 has been the reigning law for like decades.
Yes.
Under Trump, he passed, because of the emergency powers under COVID, that's when he passed Title 42. And this was like the Remain in Mexico thing, where they just weren't letting people in and they were just kicking people out. Right. So it's just more of like a chaotic type thing that has no bearing. If you ask me as an attorney, hey, I'm all for the Title 42 because they're not going to get hit with like 3-year bars, 10-year bars. They're not going to do anything, right? So, hey, bring on Title 42 so that I can help people, right?
Yep.
But, I mean, anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, Title 8.
I think that like Biden recently tried to pass a bill that would give CBP additional money for border security, which Republicans have shot down here. They want to use this whole border thing as a talking point and not actually come up with any solutions. So that brings me to my next point. When they scream open border, the border's not really open here. You guys are doing what you're supposed to be doing. The border's closed. Geographically, it may be open, but there is no actual such thing as an open border policy.
Right. We talked
Right
about
on.
that earlier. Right on,
Yes.
Tyler. You're right on. Thank you, Tyler, for jumping in tonight. I appreciate it.
I just really quick here. I live outside of Chicago. I live in a city called Rockford, Illinois. And Greg Abbott a few weeks ago flew a private plane to Rockford, Illinois airport and stuff. And I was there to video record it. And it's like I kind of had a mental breakdown because what he's doing to these people is inhumane. It's disgusting here. He's playing with people's lives here. Back in November last year, I collected a boatload of clothes from TikTok here. People donated money to my TikTok, and my church and my community donated clothes to me to help out the migrants in Chicago. So I got a U-Haul truck full of clothes and drove them up to the police department in Chicago and donated those clothes to migrants and stuff. So I'm like, I really thank both of you for what you're doing here and stuff. And giving out the factual information, because that's what I'm doing as well. And it seems like I'm giving out the factual information because what I'm talking about, you guys are agreeing with here. So I thank both of you for everything you do, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Tyler.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Tyler.
you, brother.
Hey, good
Thank you.
questions.
Great questions. Anthony, Chels, did you have another question before I bring up another panelist?
Hey, Bobby, what was that section in Title 8 that you referenced? I couldn't write that down fast enough.
It's going to be 8 USC 1325 and 26 if it's a reinstate.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, let's bring up another guest. Continue to like and share, you guys. Thank you very much. Please gift our panelists. They're doing great work here. This is educational purposes, and I think it's awesome. Bonita, how are you today? Go ahead, Bobby. I'm sorry.
I was going to tell him the smuggling code, I believe, is 1324, if I believe. It's been a little bit, but I think it's 8 USC 1324 is another one you want to look up.
Smuggler's Blues. Bonita, how are you tonight?
Good evening, you all. Thanks for having this thoughtful and engaging live. It's a wonderful thing to experience. But my question for you professionals is, for our friends on the right side of the aisle, our conservative friends that are showing repeated video clips of young men gathering at the border, crossing the border, how do we help them know that these propaganda video clips are, a lot of them are not even from the U.S. border, and how do we negate those posts that are just continually posting a negative narrative about? I don't think any of them are accurate, and if they are, please provide me that. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonita.
Are you talking about like political ads?
I often see on our friends' lives, they have a lot of propaganda about the border. They show videos of young men crossing groves, or just like marching, and they're saying it's a crisis and we're being attacked and they're terrorists and all these things. Like, how do we negate that propaganda?
Let me jump in. Let me jump in on that. I think what you're talking about, Bonita, is this is the reason that we're having this conversation tonight, is because of what you're describing, because there's so much misinformation. You know, as incredibly smart and gifted and skilled in their areas that Bobby and Rollo are, they can't stop people from posting propaganda. They can't stop people from spreading misinformation. I think, again, the reason that we're doing this is so that all of us are more informed to actually have the information, so that when we do see it, we can push back and say, actually, although to Bobby's point earlier, you try to do it in certain areas and you're not welcome there. You're kind of, but again, that's from my perspective. Anybody else have anything different they would like to say?
A lot of the videos are about like middle-aged men, military aged, and all of that, and that's what the videos are perpetuating.
Right.
So
and actually, that's a good point. That's a good point, Chelsea. Like, so the question about this influx of military-aged men.
That was my point. Like, they have this idea that we're being taken over by these military-aged men. They're coming to vote Democrat. Can you guys speak more on that? That misinformation. I'm hoping we can reach them.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bonita.
Just my opinion. Oh, you got it. Mine will be quick. The ones that I've interviewed that are military aged, and they're mostly people that are just coming here to work. They want to send remittances back to their family and then go home. That is a bulk of what I saw and what I interviewed. I've literally interviewed thousands of migrants over a period of almost 10 years. So that was the bulk of that. They just want a better life for themselves. They can only afford to send them either the father or the mother or the kids to the United States. So who do they send? They send the dad to work and then take care of their families back home. So that's what that is. So yeah, it definitely is propaganda when they're talking about military age men coming to the U.S.
Yeah, I mean, I second that. I deal with my clients, they are the people who are coming here. And I believe it's 100% framing, right? You can say that they are military aged men and then put like some eerie music in the back. Or you can say these are working age people coming to contribute to the economy, which is what it is, right? Like Bobby said, most people are coming through the southern border are Hispanic. What are the general values of Hispanic people? We value family incredibly high, right?
Sure.
Now, if it's a choice between sending my wife on this treacherous journey and coming myself, I would be considered a military age man. I'm 43. I think I might look younger, but they're like, man, look at this guy. He's military age dude coming in, right? I would be classified as that. But really, I don't want to put my kids or my wife without me being the trailblazer, right? I'm coming
Sure.
here. If I can get asylum, if I can like go through the system, if I can do things right, if I can get money, if I can send it back, whatever it is, I am going to put myself in peril before I send my kids or my wife into this country, into the trajectory from Guatemala to like Mexico. You probably seen the stories of like how bad it really is, right? And how dangerous it is, especially for women going across that. So it's all about framing. And then when I get those clients that come here, yeah, hey, where are your kids? Well, they're still in Colombia, they're still in Guatemala, they're still in Venezuela. Why aren't they here? Well, I come here because I want to help out. That's kind of what I do. So it is all framing, 100% framing, and I don't know if we can
Propaganda.
combat that.
So
You're
can
right.
I add on to that?
Please.
So a lot of people heard you say that and messaged me and said that they're just coming here to work and send money back to their country. They're not really asylum seekers. They're just not adding to the economy. They're adding to, Mexico's economy. So is there
There's a mixture of people. We run into a lot of people. So everybody has different ambitions. I would say the bulk of them are here to send money back home to take care of their families. Yes, there are going to be some that we have caught that are trying to harm the U.S. But let me tell you, we've had for decades cells within the United States. And those cells we know about, right? It's public knowledge. They're here. So we're just doing our best to make sure that we process each person and vet them. So if they say that they're not being vetted, that's not true. But Border Patrol doesn't know what we don't know. We don't actually know how many are getting away. And that's another topic you guys want to talk about gotaways later if you want.
Definitely.
It's not an accurate number, right? So if I'm walking down the bank of the border and I see some footprints, automatically I'm going to go and report it as a gotaway, but we don't know for a fact, right? We deal with facts. Gotaways is not a factual number, and I hate that it's used as a talking point.
Have we always we've always acknowledged that people are coming over here to work, and it's never really been a problem, and now it is becoming a talking point of people just coming here, working, and not giving back to the economy, not paying taxes, and so forth.
Well, okay. So I like to use the term mutually exclusive. If you come here to seek asylum, does that mean you don't come here to work and send money to your home? Does that make sense? Are the two things mutually exclusive? Absolutely not. You come here, you seek asylum. A lot of people down there, well, they don't pay taxes. Yes, they do. Like I explained before, if you were here, after 6 months, 180 days, when they turn in their I-589, they can apply for a work permit, an EAD, right? An employment authorization document, and they get social security numbers. That's how you pay taxes. If they don't, you can still qualify for an ITIN number, an individual tax identification number, for the sole purposes of paying taxes.
Paying taxes, right?
That you can't get benefits back, right? So
to the tune of $600 billion in 2022, by the way. So,
Yeah.
Go ahead, Anthony.
Something important to point out as someone who is a subject matter expert in risk and payments industries here in the United States, from a diaspora perspective, it is a multi-billion-dollar business in which P2P, so peer-to-peer payments. So the fact of the matter is that those that participate in sending money back home is not in any way related to asylum seekers, refugees, or any other status you want to put in migration. The fact of the matter is that every diaspora that has a foothold in the United States sends money back home. That includes Canadians, Europeans, East Asians, Southeast Asians, right? There's a reason why this is a multi-billion-dollar business. It's because when they apply, as Rollo pointed out, they get a TIN or an ITIN. It's another way of how we verify who people are. It's another way to have them establish bank accounts. It's another way to put them in the system. And we are able to track these sorts of things. So allowing people to participate because they have a TIN or an ITIN allows them to be banking customers, payments customers, and then we get a lot of factual data collecting. And what we see in the payment space is that the people that participate in these systems want to do it legally, because what we don't want are hawalas. We don't want these off the books, really sketchy, old fashioned abacus style ways of moving money between countries, because that's how you avoid paying taxes. That's how you end up moving money for things that really aren't legitimate. And so I wanted to throw that in because people miss that point too. And this is why getting people social security numbers, which is your tax identification number, or your ITIN, is so incredibly vital, because it helps people participate in society, which means they're going to spend money, which means we're going to raise tax revenue locally, state, and federal.
Thank you, Anthony. Appreciate that. Superstar, welcome. Do you have questions for our panelists?
Sorry, I didn't know I had gone up. I wanted to ask a couple questions, but I don't want to stay up because I have kids I have to deal with. So
I get it. We all get that.
Quickly, how do they break down the got away numbers? Because that's just kind of confusing. It seems like it's a larger number than it actually is. And then my next question is, what politicians do you see locally who are doing the right thing and should be supported? And then what organizations do you see around the country that are doing the right thing and should be supported?
Thank you, Superstar. Appreciate you.
I can answer the gotaways if you like.
Yeah, go for it. I mean, I know you said we've got to touch on it at some point. It's an important topic, so go for it. Yeah, please. Thank you.
Overall, it's just a highly inaccurate number. I mean, you have agents that go out to the field and they'll find some footprints, and if they don't find somebody at the end of the footprints, they log it as a gotaway, but they don't know.
So, Bobby, before you go too deep into that, can you give us what the definition of a gotaway actually is, so that we can sort of understand it? Because I've always had questions about it too, if there is a definition, I guess.
So, believe it or not, gotaways weren't even a stat that was even given to the federal government, DHS. It was more of a Border Patrol thing, so we can actually work different areas and see where we need to be at. I can't tell you specific techniques.
That's fair.
But
that's fair.
I will say that it's become a political talking point, and it's a highly inaccurate number, because I can literally go and patrol the border, see some footprints. I don't find anybody at the end of the footprints. I go report it as a gotaway, but we don't know how many are in that group. It could be one or two, but the agent is counting it as like 5 or 10, and they'll take that number and publish it. So it's really inaccurate. You can have another agent come around and see the same footprints, possibly doing the same thing and reporting the same footprints. So whenever I hear that talking point, I kind of laugh and giggle, because it's usually coming from the right. The left, I haven't really heard anything about gotaways, and I don't think they know how to answer to that, because they don't understand how Border Patrol actually counts gotaways, and they also don't even know what is getting around other than the gotaways. We don't know that. It could be a higher number, it could be a lower number. We have no idea. Very inaccurate. They shouldn't be using it as a talking point.
Well, because they say
the margin of error is bad.
Yes, very bad.
Because they say gotaways, and what CPD says is gotaways and turnarounds. So like anybody that turns back around, whichever direction, it's very.
How do you know it's not a rancher? You know, there's business between private owners that walk back and forth. I've literally seen a rancher take his cattle over to Mexico and back and so forth. That's kind of what you see on the borders. So if we have ranchers doing that, how do you count that as a gotaway? It's just very inaccurate, it's disingenuous, and I don't really think that they should actually count that as a statistic, to be honest with you.
Yeah, because oftentimes when it comes up, at least in conversations that I've had with people, no one can seem to put a number on it. They just say, the gotaways has increased by whatever, and I'm like, well, what are you basing that on? And no one seems to know. So once again, it becomes it's a talking point more than anything else.
The other correlation is I think there's an increase in Border Patrol agents as they're continuing to, increase the amount of agents. So if we have more agents and they're going out to the field and seeing these footprints, maybe that's the reason for the increase in stats. I don't know.
Gotcha.
We don't know for a fact. So it's a highly inaccurate stat, and I hope that both the left and right understand that it's not accurate.
Gotcha. Legal Dad, good evening, sir. You have a question for our panelists?
I do. I have two. And as a lawyer, of course, have questions for the lawyer.
Shocker.
So first, is it possible, and what would it take to move asylum cases from taking years to months? Can you hire enough judges? Can you have enough immigration lawyers there to give people due process in a significantly shorter period of time than what happens now?
Well, I mean, I think as it stands right now, each immigration judge have like 5, 6, 7,000 cases assigned to them each. So it would take an immense amount of new immigration judges to be hired, and DHS attorneys, and then a lot more people wanting to even touch immigration law. I'm sure, Legal Dad, you want to do immigration law now, right? I'm inspiring you to come into the fold of the realm of immigration attorneys. It would take a lot. It would take a lot, right? And I just don't know how that could even be, since we have barely enough immigration attorneys that may be turning immigration judges to even, I don't want to say man, but man, woman, the positions, the positions that would be required to make a significant change and turn it from the multiple years to like months, right? I don't know.
Thank you.
Logistically, it doesn't make sense.
Right. It seems like it would be difficult, and sometimes enough money can make a difference. The 6-month requirement for asylum seekers to get a work authorization, is there any particular reason that it needs to be 6 months? You hear all the time, well, who's going to support them? Well, why not let them support themselves? And if they're here seeking asylum under the law, why not let them get work permits basically right away and start to support themselves right away?
If they were all given a parole, a specific type of parole, you can apply immediately for work permits. The problem is that very few people actually get paroled in, and therefore you have to apply for the I-589. And just the current laws right now for immigration, it requires them to wait 6 months. I would be all for taking that out. And if the Biden administration is hearing and they want to take that requirement out, that would be awesome. Now, I don't know if it's ruled by the INA, which would be a hindrance to that, because the INA, the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952, is where we get our basis for immigration law right now. So you can see how problematic that can be.
So there's no magic to the 6 months. It just happens to be the current law. With the proper political will, that 6 months could be 6 days, 6 weeks.
Trump tried to make that a year, 365 days. And for a while, a lot of people that were already at their 180 day mark got bumped up to 365 days. And then it got thrown down, and then it went back to 180 days. And there was people that waited like 2 or 3 years because they got stuck in that limbo. And we had to file writs of mandamus and stuff like that to make these people respond and get their applications processed. So it just caused more chaos. Now I'm assuming that if Trump tried to get it up, try to get the time up to 365 days, then someone can come and say, let's do it right away.
Right.
But I
Gotcha.
don't.
That
I'd have to
it
research
kind of
more.
goes it kind of goes back to what you were talking about earlier, though, Rolo, about you want the process to be slower, just because you ultimately know the inevitability of what's going to happen on the end. But we need the process to be efficient. To Legal Dad's point, those are good questions. Like, why does it have to take so long? It's a manpower issue? It seems like it's a person power issue, process power issue. So there's things we could do legislatively to expedite that process, but it may not necessarily be good for those that are seeking asylum. Is that a fair question?
Yeah. Here's how I would fix this, Legal Dad. I would try to minimize the need for asylum seekers, and then bump it to USCIS and just
Hmm.
give out immigration visas, right? Work visas, skilled, unskilled, family, just increase the visa amounts. There's only about 1 million visas that are given a year, and that includes work, family based, and all other stuff except for direct relatives. 1 million for a country of 300 and what are we up to, 60 something million, and a capitalist country that that needs a lot of workers, skilled and unskilled, and then we have a very limited amount of visas that we actually give out. To me, it does not make sense.
I got a question for
Bobby?
you, Rolo, in that sense. If we were to do something like that, right, where we kind of take out that mechanism, just give them work permits, do you think that that can actually entice more from the southern countries to come up here, and then we'll start receiving more and more at the borders? Because here's my situation, in my opinion, is that yes, we need non-skilled labor. We have to have it, in my opinion, and we need on a humanitarian part of it. We should allow some people to come in, but we also have to minimize the amount of people that are trying to come back over here because they're just going to keep flooding our system. So from an enforcement perspective, I think that if you entice them with you're going to get work permits without going through a process, they're just going to keep coming in. So from an enforcement portion of this, it's going to make it chaotic for border patrol because they're going to have to keep processing. Now if we had more judges and more agents to do that, then I'd be all for it.
Well, you got to understand that the visas are processed at home, right? So the visas you have to apply before, unless you have a visa waiver from like Germany or Chile. I think South America
Canada.
provides a visa waiver.
Canada.
Then you can just come in, right? And
Canada.
then you have to leave, right? Canada,
Right.
yeah. But I think it would circumvent what you're saying there, Bobby, because if I want to apply for a work visa, I have to do it from home. If I want to apply for an immigrant visa, I have to do it from home, right?
Right.
Once I'm here, there's
Your home
and I
country. Your home country, you mean. Home country.
yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah,
Okay.
my home country,
Right.
right? So it would bypass the whole problem, and then we can change it from a 1952 INA, very, very poorly written law, right? Xenophobic, racist, retrograde. I don't know what you want to call it, but
Yeah.
definitely not. It doesn't fit the economic needs that we have. If we can get rid of that and then change the immigration laws to first accommodate our economy, right? Lead with the economy so we can gratify our unquenchable thirst for capitalism and money. So we can do based on visas based on financial needs, economic needs for the country, and then family reunification. So I can sponsor my
Yeah.
brothers, my sisters, right, my kid in a more streamlined way, and then a humanitarian need, and make that flexible to meet our needs, and then we can like adjust accordingly. Then it would make a lot more sense
Right.
because as it is right now, this is a self-fulfilling prophecy, whatever's happening at the border,
Mm.
because we have to take under account the destabilization of all of our countries, including my country, right? The constant destabilization. Look at Venezuela right now. Why are they coming over? They're a rich country, but why are they coming over? One can say communism, but really is the sanctions that we put on all these countries.
Right.
And then the war on drugs, the Northern Triangle, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, that area, it is riddled with drugs and crime and, based on drugs. But why is that? Because of the war on drugs. by the US.
Right.
So it's a lot of self-fulfilling prophecies that if we really thought back and take politics and ideologues out of this and ask people, like you and immigration attorneys who see this on a daily basis, I'm sure we can sit down in about 30 minutes. We could probably come up with better solutions than any politician who has never apprehended anyone at the border.
Yeah.
Well,
Right?
we're going to get into solutions. Legal Dad, did you have a follow up, sir?
I do not. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, guys. Facts, great job as always. Catch
Legal
you later.
Dad, question for you real quick. What kind of lawyer do you, or what kind of law do you practice?
I am primarily a transactional lawyer doing real estate contracts, corporate, that sorts of stuff. Never go to
Awesome.
court.
He's fighting
Soon
the
to be an
FAA.
immigration lawyer.
He's fighting the FAA.
Hablo un poquito de español.
Okay, that's good enough. You can be a border patrol.
Hasta luego.
Take care. Be well. Good. Those are good
So
questions.
somebody asked me about what is the background check that you guys do when you process people.
So that's one of those questions that I got to be careful with.
Okay.
This is what I can tell you. We do check for criminal history. Just like your police officers in your local community, they'll check your background, check your priors, and we do have a mechanism to check to see if you've been convicted of anything in your home country also.
They said that some countries don't share that kind of information, so
They
okay. Okay.
Yeah, that is true.
And I can also say once you get out and you start through the process, you also have to go through FBI checks and like
Yeah.
a lot of checks in the United States in order just to be processed for asylum claim. Thank you for the gifts.
Welcome,
Motherfucker!
Magataka. How are you this evening?
Thank you, friend Fax. Thank you for the panel. Hermanos, Rolo, and Bobby, thank you very much for what you're doing. It's been a long time, Fax and audience. It's been a long journey since the 90s, since the early 80s on college days at San Diego after graduation and being at the San Diego City College areas where you are studying for a test and suddenly people is jumping and ICE agents jumping over you and one will stop and say, "Hey, what's up with you?" "I'm just studying for a test." "Well, you look too brown for me." Well, ask my teacher. Anyways, I'm here to connect the dots as far as an early conversation between, in regards Bobby, that I mentioned to Bobby at a different live. Back in the 90s, let's remember that in California, that's where the first MAGA or the second MAGA. First was Ronald Reagan. Second one was Pete Wilson, the governor, which it was the governor from 1983 to 1999. It was the beginning of MAGA. It was the beginning, the brewing, the putting the dots together, especially in immigration jurisprudence or the judicial laws. That's where everything started it. Then when GOP understands that they have to buy and own through the entire country talk radio to use as a political tool to the masses. To make the story short, when in 1994, 1993, 1992, Pete Wilson starts talking in California about Prop 187. We, the brown people, we are the vermin of America and especially of California, and that's where the Mexican American community comes out in tsunamis and vote to get the GOP out of California politics and take control of Congress. However, the poison had already permeated through Californians, Republicans, and the invasion term, demagogic term, just permeated through us. Every channel across California news will talk about the invasion of illegals, Mexican illegals. So then these militias, the white supremacy militias called Minutemen, they started getting to the border.
Right.
And army and army garments, and then the invasion grew up that terminology, and Border Patrol needed it more, decided to get more personnel. And every commercial within the news or sports, it was about become a border agent, personnel. We, America needs you. And among my, us, the brown community, from the border boys, they to be 21, or the 21ers, we didn't know what to do. We were tempted to become a border agent. Hey, let's work for the federal government. It's a good pay. Some of my personal friends, the closest, they went through a process. When it came down to the conversations about what we had here and here, that's when we got the bag. That's when we understood what they were looking for. Then Rush Limbaugh, John and Cage, Mark Levin, through the talk radios, they were talking about Border Patrol problems to recruit personnel, so much needed. To the point that the Border Patrol decided to rely into the white supremacy militias, the same Minutemen. And I'm telling you, as a fact of the matter, there was no internet. So the backgrounds to these militias, or whichever applicant, it did not have that much depth. And the necessity yesterday, about growing the force, the background was very superficial. And ethnicity bias it was not part of the conversation. And that's how Bobby's previous generation, his captains, lieutenants, sergeants, and the agents about to retire, the ones are training him, his generation, and the previous generation. Think about it. He never made it through. Right. So when we hear Bobby saying these guys are not asking the correct question, it's because they were trained by them with the bias on it. And we have to, so that's where I'm connecting the dots. And that's why the answer to the previous attorney, it's the comprehensive immigration reform, because the answers for Bobby and Rollo and the previous guy, as far as how can we go from a 3-year term to a 1 month, whoever reads the content of the comprehensive immigration bill that passed the Senate through Obama years, and it was sabotaged by the House through Boehner, it covers every question that Bobby has, the attorney has. Thank you very much, and Rollo, and each one of you. Even has a chapter that speaks about all of us here getting old, and we need to be replaced by labor. There's these temporary working permits that you process in U.S. consulate on those countries, where you come, you work, and there's check marks to make sure that you're going back to your country on time, or according to the visa, the working visa, and so you have an opportunity to come back again. So, but going back, Border Patrol, in regards to this invasion, the culture that his generation has, and he can call me that I'm wrong, on the majority, especially on the Caucasian side, it's a culture that goes through training, but it started on the 90s, on that big influx of recruits. That force, it was poised into the bias, because many hundreds, if not thousands of them, they were part of the white supremacy Minutemen militias.
Is that sort of is that your question, my friend?
No, as a matter of fact, I don't have a question. I'm here to pass this little missing link to a early topic. I much appreciate a top Thank you to the internet. This is a long awaiting street, Main Street citizens that we can take this topic instead of waiting for TV network. Thank you, Fax. Thank
Thanks,
you.
buddy.
And I
Appreciate you,
will
man.
hold the same en español. I'm gonna have my brother Robo and and we're bringing Bobby. If Bobby said so, Bobby is gonna be in español. Same thing.
Yes.
Thank
Yes.
you very much.
Thank
Friday,
you.
same hour. We're gonna do it at same hour. It seems that people has the ability. Facts. Thank you very much, hermano.
Thank you, brother.
I
Appreciate
love
it.
you. Thank you
Gracias.
very much.
Thank you,
Coman frutas
Maga.
y verduras.
You be well, my friend. Thank you very much.
Nos
That's
vemos.
great. That's great. Is that really Friday night? You guys are going to do it in Spanish? Is that true?
Yeah,
That's
we've been
awesome.
talking with Maga.
That's
So I'm
awesome.
looking for like a Spanish like platform because this is also it's so much misinformation within the Hispanic population.
Sure.
Maybe even more than with the English speaking population. I don't know, but
Right.
it's very desperately needed.
Well, I mean, a couple of things before we bring up some more guests. You touched when we first met you, when Anthony and I first met you, Rollo. You talked about the INA in 1952, 1954, I think, and that we've been working off of that same policy for that long. Is that in your opinion, is that the crux of our challenges because the law is 70 years old now, 60 years old now, or 70 years old? I mean, or does it need to be torn up and start? I mean, I know you talked about economic family reunification and humanitarian approaches to our immigration, but are we hung up because of the INA? If that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, the backbone of our immigration law today is the INA, Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952, right? Now, there has been some attempts at reforming the INA. There was the IRA, the Immigration Some Responsibility Act, and then the IRA. It was like 1992 and then 1997, I think. And they have been disastrous. Like I always tell people, you can't grab a turd, polish it, and then come up with a good product. You just can't.
Right. Yeah.
My dad is an artisan. He grabs like semillas, pits, and bamboo and coconuts and all kinds of stuff, and he makes beautiful earrings and all kinds of products. So that's why that hits home, right? You can't grab a turd and then polish it and then come up with something beautiful. You can't. And that's exactly what the INA is. It is. If you look at the socio-political backings of that time of 1952, we have to understand that it was before the civil rights movement. It was at the height of the Red Scare, right? It was at the height of destabilization of most of the countries in South America and around the world. In fact, in 1954, the U.S. did a coup in Guatemala, where I'm from, where my dad fought against the invading army. La Liberación is what it's called. And he was a cadet. He was in his teens, and he fought against 2,000 men, 115 cadets, and they beat the invading army, and then they were deemed high treason. So his head was wanted for decades.
Wow.
Until 1984, when the president came in and said, no, these guys are actually national heroes. So my dad's an actual legitimate national hero in Guatemala.
Cool.
Right? He's 90 now, and he's back in Guatemala right now. But what I'm saying is that is the base of the INA. And most of our laws, like, you can't break out of it. Like the visas, you have a limit of less than 1 million visas per year that can be given, and that has to be like distributed among all the different categories, that are planted there. But you can't step out of the less than 1 million visas. And I think it's like 180 something visas that are given for like work visas, per year. So then you have all these huge corporations with like fancy attorneys, and they gobble those up right away, because it's a visa lottery. So you really can't be guaranteed a visa either. It's just you put your name in the lottery and hopefully you get it. So it is so bad. It is so bad that not even people who are qualified, highly educated, and I have merit-based immigration. Not even those people are able to just come into the country, provide a valuable service at all,
Gotcha.
right?
Yeah, so we're
So
so we're living off of mistakes of the past. Is what you're trying to say. Got it.
yeah, I would throw it
Fair
away.
enough.
I would throw it away. And
Iron Pit, welcome. Thank you for your patience. What are your questions for our audience?
Yeah, hi, Fax. Thanks so much for having this tonight, and thanks,
Sure.
Rollo and Bobby, for being here. Hopefully this is a quick question. What happens to people that do not come in through a port of entry, or are asylum seekers, and or are rejected once they, or are rejected in the asylum process interview?
So if they go through the port of entry, and I think Rollo can talk about how they throttle the numbers that are coming through. And I think you've made a point, Rollo, before that if they don't meet that criteria of coming through, like the numbers, they just end up going around. Whether they're between the port of entry or at the port of entry as Border Patrol, we're still going to process them the same way. They still have a right to claim asylum. They're still going to be amenable to Title 8 if that's what we're using during that time frame, and we just take them back to the station and process them. So if they come through the port of entry or between the ports of entry, regardless of status, they still have rights.
But what if they are not coming through the port of entry and they're found by somebody and they don't ask for, if they don't ask for asylum, what happens? Do they process and sent back across the border? What happens?
It's going to depend on their background. So if they come in for the very first time, it's their only entry without admission, typically, and it's going to depend on, I think it depends on what the AUSA wants to do in certain situations. If they're from Mexico, for example, we could just give them a VR, which is a voluntary return. We can give them an ER, which is an expedited removal. We'll process them. We'll bar them for 5 years and then send them back to Mexico. We literally drive them back the same day, but there is punitive action. They can't come back for 5 years. If they do, then we process them as a reinstate, and we'll add an additional 5 years. If they do it again, it's 20 years ban. So there is punitive action on Title 8. VRs, there's no punishment on that. We basically just get their information and send them right back to Mexico if they're amenable to it.
Okay, because listening to all these lives, I don't think MAGA understands the difference between people coming through the port of entry requesting asylum or people requesting asylum that haven't come through port of entry versus people that aren't seeking asylum, and they think everybody's just allowed in. So to me, I think that's a message that I needed to understand it more, how that process worked, because it's something I don't hear talked about a lot. It's like we just say, oh, well, they're asylum seekers, and they're like, oh, no, they're all coming in illegally. So there is a process for sending people back.
So,
correct?
and I think Rollo and I may disagree a little bit on, I don't know if we agree or disagree, but as soon as they come into our territory, it's automatically a violation of our immigration law. It's an entry without permission. But remember, they have to see a judge, and the judge is the one that's going to determine that, right? I'm not the one that determines it. I just charge them with it and say, hey, I found that this person did this. I'm going to send you off to the court, and they'll decide that. That's not within my power to be the judge. The only time that I'm the judge is on a reinstate, and that's the patrol agent in charge has to sign off on it. And we basically just sent him to jail because he or she had a previous history of apprehension, and we literally sign off as if we're the judge. So we can actually send them out. ERs are amenable to, if you're amenable to an ER, expedited removal, we also sign off on it, and that's at a lower level. That's going to be at a watch commander level. It's the patrol agent in charge is in charge of the station, and then one level below that is a watch commander, and they can sign off on an expedited removal.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Can I ask a clarifying question, Iron Pit?
Sure.
Are you also wondering about people who come here? Because you put up different scenarios, right? One of them, I think, was people who never got caught and then they come in and they stay here. Is that one of the The people that you were wondering what happens to them?
No, no. What I'm wondering about is the people that are outside that scope, right? They're caught somewhere along the line, and they don't ask for asylum. They just are sneaking in, all these mental patients and criminals and all this stuff that Trump talks about. And what happens to them? Do they get deported immediately, or do they go to court? And what is
Okay, so
different
Depends.
from I mean, if this is Title 8, this has always been the process. This isn't something new that Biden implemented,
Right.
right? That now the borders are wide open and it's like free for all, everybody come. Am I missing something here?
No, you're correct. They're still under
right.
Title 8 with what if they don't claim asylum, then they're gonna be charged with either an 1325 or 26, depending on their background. And if they are going to be charged like that, they're going to be barred for 5 years if it's their first time. And if it's their second or more times, it's either 10 years or 20 years. They actually get sent to our local jails. We set a detainer on them, and then with the detainer, ICE will pick them up and then send them back to the country that they're from. If they're from Mexico, we could do they can do an expedited removal under 8 USC 1325, charge them with that, bar them for 5 years, and then literally drive them back to the port of entry if they're from Mexico.
I can also speak as an immigration attorney. Part of my practice is called removal defense. So there are many people here who came many years ago, 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago, right? Now, there's this thing called cancellation of deportation under 42A. And if you can prove that you've been here for 10 years continuously, that you don't have any disqualifying crimes, that you're a person of good moral character, that you have a relative who is either U.S. citizen or legal permanent resident, that is a direct relative, such as a spouse, parent, or son or daughter, and that if your removal will cause an extremely and unusual hardship before an immigration judge, then you can they will cancel your deportation, and you can come here and stay with a green card and then become a U.S. citizen. So there are recourses for people who have come here, have not been caught, are good people. They have businesses, houses, cars, pay taxes, everything. They just haven't had the opportunity to either seek asylum, because you can only do it within the first year, right? Very few exceptions. You can surpass the 1 year bar. But then they've been here for 10 years at least. Then there are some ways that we can humanely, allow people to stay here. And I've been able to win a lot of those, and they're very hard to win because of the extremely and unusual hardship bar is really high. So if my son or daughter is going to suffer, just like any other son and daughter whose parents get put in jail, that's not good enough. There has to be, there's really stringent bar that most of these cancellation or removal cases fall on.
Hey, Rolo, just so you know, when we do expedited removals at the station, we put pro bono sheets inside of their package, but we just send them back to Mexico. So
thank you, Iron Pit, for joining tonight.
Yeah,
we appreciate
thank you. All right, good night.
Thanks.
Thank you.
they don't know what they're signing. They have no idea what they're signing. The agent's like, hey, sign right here. They'll sign.
Yeah.
Because
First thing I always tell people is don't sign anything.
Yeah.
Don't sign anything.
And we put refuse to sign if they don't. And then if they request a lawyer, then we have to get them the lawyer, and it becomes an WNTA at that point. We have to do a WNTA, set them up a court date, and they have to have access to a lawyer. That's the way it's supposed to go. And
speaking of lawyers, welcome, Dave.
Hello. Hi, Rolo. We've met before.
Hey, Dave.
Hi. It's funny. I asked that something you brought up before, something that that we talked about before when I mentioned about funding the agency, getting more judges, and you had the same answer. You wanted to take a long time. And from an attorney's perspective, I understand that. You know, we have clients and we want our clients to do well, and sometimes we do that by gaming the system. But the other issue is this is a constant hot button topic politically in this country. The politics of it, with all due respect to everybody, are shit. They cause havoc. And that's kind of, you know, we have to look at it from the perspective of your clients versus, I'm not going to say the good of the country, but let's call it the sanity of the country. You know what I mean? And it causes a lot of insanity. It gives very bad politicians a lot of ammunition to use against everybody and to stay in office. And that's a problem. But I want to point something out. And this, I want to share my
Before you
immigration.
go, may I do a little bit pushback on that?
Oh, absolutely, Rollo. That's what we're here for. Sure, go ahead.
I would ask, how do immigrants affect the normal citizen of the United States? How do they negatively impact them? If they come here, pay taxes, contribute to the society, Max threw out a bunch of facts in the beginning of how profitable immigrants are to the country and how beneficial they are. So the pushback would be, let's say that I am gaming the system, which I won't admit to that. You know, I am using the laws as
Don't
they are
admit
written.
it. Sure. Okay, sure, yeah.
I'm
All
using
right,
the laws
got
as
it,
they
got
are
it.
written. And
I do
for the
too.
benefit of
I
my
do the
clients,
same thing. I do the same thing. I could tell you a story, but not worth it.
then I would
Not now.
I would have to
Yeah.
ask. I would have to ask, how does that negatively impact you? Why should anyone care? Right?
Oh,
Besides
well,
politics, objectively,
besides
why should
politics, you're
anyone care?
absolutely correct. Objectively, you're absolutely correct. Immigrants are absolutely necessary. They're necessary for this country. They're necessary to kind of keep this country vibrant. But at the same time, a lot of bad people use it to also fuck with a lot of people. What I want to do is, because of everything you're talking about, I want to share with the class my own immigrant story.
Yeah,
Hold on.
let's try to be brief if we could. Dave.
I'll be very brief. I'll be
Thank you, sir.
incredibly brief. And it's
Appreciate
important that people see what I look like.
Said
I
no
don't look-
lawyer ever.
Well, for this story, no, I'll be brief. So, family came over in 1979. We came over during the diaspora of Soviet Jews from the Soviet Union to the United States. And the politics behind how we came over is completely opposite to the politics of all of these people. All these refugees are coming from the South. Okay? We came over, we were welcomed by successive administrations, by Reagan, by Carter. In fact, in the last diaspora, the one that came after me, right before the Soviet Union fell, they got a lot of them that wanted to come here got stuck in Italy. That's kind of like that was the route. You went from the Soviet Union, you spent some time in Italy, sometimes maybe a little time in Austria, you waited for your visa came, and you came over here, or you went to Israel. And that was very easy. We're Jews, it was easy. But a lot of people wanted to come here.
Question, Dave, please.
I'm going real quick. In 1979, all of a sudden the visa stopped. And it took just two senators, making a couple of calls, and then the floodgates opened up again. It's all politics. That's all I'm going to say. People who look like me and are considered good immigrants versus people who are slightly browner than me, and they're considered takers or bad immigrants.
Sure.
And I just wanted to share that, just to give everybody 400 people a view of just how fucked the system is.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
We get it. I mean, it's connected to a lot of things. I appreciate that. Appreciate that, Dave. Thanks very much, man. Appreciate you.
Thanks,
We'll
Dave.
talk
Well,
more later.
Have a
It
good night.
goes into the talking point that a lot of Republicans say that migrants coming, especially from the southern border, are crime ridden. Like, that is the biggest talking point I hear. I go into Republican lives quite often, and that is one of the biggest talking points.
Yeah.
And it's exactly the opposite of the facts. The statistics show it. Immigrant communities, they're arrested less, they are convicted less, there are less crimes. That's FBI statistics. I don't make it up.
Yeah, according to this economic findings from Forbes, 1 in 8 U.S. residents is an immigrant. Immigrants paid over $600 billion in taxes in 2022, and 22% of all U.S. entrepreneurs are immigrants.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Thanks again,
Right
Nate.
here.
Appreciate you, brother.
All right.
Appreciate
Bye,
it.
guys.
Be well. Thanks. Anthony, Chels, any other questions? Yeah, go for it, brother.
Yep. So I have, as always, because I like math and history so much. Let's add some statistics to the conversation. Every single person that is not indigenous or native to North America is an immigrant. So 100% of us, pretty much, non-native and non-indigenous people are immigrants. Here's an interesting little historical tidbit. What has the United States of America done for the last 141 years? Don't answer, because I got the answer for you. I'm going to name some areas. The Philippines, Cuba, the entire Caribbean, South America, Central America. What have we done for the last 141 years, you ask? Well, we've disrupted all of their economies, all of their political processes, any democracy that they had in place, because we wanted their natural resources, right? Now, here's a little bit of irony. How long do you think the United States military has been fully integrated, meaning white people do this, people of color do that? How long do you think we've had a formally integrated military? This November will make a whole 70 years. We have 140 plus years of disrupting other people's country, only 70 years of treating everyone in the military equally, yet the issue is the southern border, ignoring the fact that we're the ones that created it by spending the last 140 plus years disrupting things. And one last fact. Did you know that when men from the Philippines joined the United States Navy, they were allowed 2 jobs in which, if they stayed in the military for X time, they would be allowed citizenship? Stewards and cooks. So even starting with the way we treat people has been a historical problem, and as Dave so pointed out, fucked. But I think it's interesting that we have been othering people in our own military, and only in 70 years have we not. But that for 141 plus years, the othering of people we decided to go do on their soil, and yet for some reason we still think that the border crisis can be solved. To point this out, what Rollo was saying, 1954 is that year. That will be 70 years ago this November when we integrated the military. It's also when we started conveniently coming up with all of these policies of immigration, because all the white folk had arrived. So it was time to start to curtail other people from coming from disrupted countries. So just wanted to put
the Red Scare,
because I love new stuff.
McCarthyism, Red Scare.
Yeah.
Ooh, Zacharina, thank you for your patience. What's on your mind tonight?
Thanks for having me up. I do have 2 questions, and one of them I know is going to seem silly, but I really don't know.
No such thing. Ask away.
So the first one is, often when we hear about immigrants and stuff, it's always the southern border. And I heard you saying that, on the border, you had to ask them certain questions and put them through certain tests. So my question is that across the board? All immigrants from all different countries, are they treated with equal scrutiny, or is there a different level of scrutiny for different countries?
As far as processing is concerned, I can tell you that there are some treaties with different countries, so they're amenable to different treatment. We also treat family units a little bit differently compared to single, individuals. But to answer your question, in current policy, I couldn't answer that right now, because that is something that continuously changes, and I'm not on the inside with that. When I was in Border Patrol, what I can tell you is that not all countries were processed the same way, is what I can tell you about that.
It's fair.
A lot of them, let's say, for example, southern country, somebody that we had a treaty with for whatever reason, we would get the information and say, hey, this person, we have to set them up with a WANTA, a warrant of arrest notice to appear. We can't remove them unless they see the immigration judge. But the specific country themselves, I couldn't tell you right now, as of today, what they're doing inside Border Patrol. Couldn't tell you.
Okay, fair enough.
Well, I can tell you the difference between like Cuban people, and the rest of Latin America, right? Cuban people for the longest time, it was called dry foot, wet foot. So as long as they set foot on U.S. soil, they were able to claim a form of asylum. Within a year, they would be given refugee status, and then within 5 years, they would be U.S. citizens. And then you have a lot of Cubans who came that way, right? And because, in my opinion, now this is strictly opinion, but it could be, backed by facts, most Cubans vote Republican because they fear the left or whatever communism that they're fleeing from, and they equate the American left to communism. So they vote Republican against their own interests and against every other best interest of every other immigrant, because they don't have to go through the same process that we do. Does that make sense? So
It
different
does. That's
countries,
very interesting. Yeah.
We've
so
seen
then
that.
you have,
We've seen that with South Florida. If you look at most recent elections, you've seen the Cuban population really, like Miami-Dade County used to be a very strong Democratic stronghold in Florida, like one of the few areas in the state. And now, because of what you're talking about, a lot of that rhetoric, and then people literally voting against their best interests, we've seen that shift. It's interesting.
Well, that's why when they talk about like we need to get the Latino vote, it's so different because there's so many different diverse groups of that
Right.
it's so hard to tell what they're talking about, like who they're specifically going after.
Thank you, Zacharina, for jumping up. Did you have another question?
I did have one more question. This is the one that I know it's going to sound silly, but I really honestly don't understand it, because I think just because I take things literally and I take words literally, but when we talk about undocumented immigrants, and they say, oh, we have this many undocumented immigrants, it's like if there's no documentation about them, how do we have a count on them? Like, how can we say how many there is if they're not documented?
Great question.
I guess it's semantics, you could call it, right? To us, undocumented means that you're not here legally, meaning that you don't have either a legal permanent resident status, U.S. citizenship, or you're not here on a valid visa, right? So that means that you're undocumented. Now, there's DACA-mented, so there's like DACA recipients. They are only here with it's like the word escapes me, but they're not being deported right now, right? They're deferred action. So if you apply for DACA, you're still undocumented because you don't have any real legal status, but you're here with DACA, the government. You're not high priority. You're registered with the government. You have a work permit. You have a social security number. You can work. You can buy homes. You can buy cars. You can get insurances. You can do all kinds of stuff. You're just pretty much a second class citizen because nowhere
So
in the
it's
DACA
really
thing
not.
will lead you to a U.S. citizenship. Go ahead.
So it's really not as nefarious as people make it sound when they speak. Because like when they speak about it, they make it sound like the undocumented ones are the worst. But actually, that does not sound bad to me. They're here.
Right.
They say, hey, I'm here. And we said, yeah, we know you're there. Go ahead and do what you're doing and we'll get to you.
Let me tell you a funny story. Can I tell you
It's
a
kind
funny
of
story?
like, before you do that, it's kind of like the getaway argument that Bobby was making earlier, right? It just becomes a talking point more than anything else.
Right.
Sorry.
Let me tell you a
sorry,
funny
Lola, go ahead.
story. In my family, I have a sister-in-law, right? She married my brother-in-law, and she is American, the U.S., right? My brother-in-law is from Argentina. My wife's from Argentina. And in a family meeting, she's a wonderful person. I love her to death. she's like, I was so ignorant about immigrants that I thought that undocumented people would only come out at night, and they would hide everywhere, and I just didn't see them, right? But in reality, it's your neighbor, it's your,
Sure.
everyone that's there. I mean, we're all over the place. Are we undocumented? A lot of us are. Will you ever know that? Not unless you really get to know us, what our legal status is. But it's funny, but it's real, and a lot of people have that perception about undocumented folks.
Well,
Thank you, Zacharina. I appreciate you. Thanks for joining those questions. Don't think
yeah,
that they were
y'all keep
bad because
it
they
up.
were
It's
awesome.
great. Thanks.
Sure thing. You
Thanks,
got it. Have a
Sabrina.
good night. All right. I want to kind of shift gears a little bit. I want to talk about a couple of things. Are you guys cool hanging for a little longer? Are you good? You got to bounce? You guys are good? Awesome. Fentanyl. Obviously, it's a button issue. We know that the majority of it, the overwhelming majority of it, is manufactured in China. We know that at last check, I think the number was upwards of 90% of all fentanyl that comes into America comes through ports of entry and through by American citizens. Are those statements accurate from your perspective, gentlemen? Yeah.
I would say they're pretty accurate. Yes.
Okay. So from again, one of the pieces of misinformation I think that comes out is that there's the cartel and there's mules and that they're working with the Chinese agents and bad actors to put the fentanyl in the backs of little kids with their backpacks traveling across the Mexican desert. I don't know if there's an answer to that question, but that's one of the things that we need to kind of push back against misinformation. So, any thoughts on fentanyl in general, guys?
So any illicit substance, you got to have somebody on the Mexican side bringing it through, and then when they cross the border, you got to have Americans to help to transport it and so forth. So yes, I can say that Americans have a lot to do with it, and there's a great supply and demand issue here.
Sure.
And because Border Patrol is so bogged down with processing, that is something that the cartel is specifically doing on purpose. Nothing that is happening right now is by accident. The cartel is very crafty in their works. And whatever they can do to put money in their pocket, they're going to do it.
Okay.
Can I blow your mind a little bit regarding that fact?
Sure.
Anthony, you can fact check me if you like. But there's a BBC report. There's a BBC report about semi-submersible watercrafts. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, in that BBC report, they state that I think it's 95 to 98% of drugs are smuggled not through the southern border, but through the ports, through the water ports, right? And they're done through $1 million semi-submersible crafts that carry tons of cocaine and fentanyl and other types of drugs. And they're very hard to detect by our Coast Guard because they're almost pretty much like submarines, but they're not quite submersible. They're semi-submersible. And they're manned by either one or two people, or they're now drones, right? So through drones, they can navigate the waterways with tons of drugs, and then that's how they smuggle it in through the east and west coast, right? Now, if I was un capo from the cartels in Sinaloa, right? If I was el primo del Chapo, then I would send a lot of people with backpacks with a few pounds of like marijuana or something, and just to run across the border all the time.
Sure.
So that I would keep the conversation about the southern border
Exactly.
and make that a political talking point. And then I am at the same time putting in tons, literally tons and tons of drugs where no one talks about it, which is east and west coast.
So real quick, when they get them at those ports, they count them as southern border, right? So like when they get them as
I'll
the
be right back.
subs,
Go ahead.
they're
Not sure on
counting those as the
So
southern border.
I
If I'm
think that
correct.
it's like from South Carolina all the way across to like California or something. That is the
Correct.
southern border.
Yes.
So a
Hey,
lot of the
Yeah.
stats that we see are really like southern border
speaking to
being
the
like,
point that you I'm sorry.
Go.
Speaking to the point you made, Rolo, about the people that are getting bringing in with the packs, they're actually kind of indentured to the cartels, because if they can't afford to come through through Mexico, you either pay or you carry this illicit substance, and they carry it through the mountains through treacherous terrain, and a lot of them actually ditch it once they get in because they don't want to get caught with it, right? But if they get caught with the illicit substance, they're going to get in more trouble for it. So they'll ditch it when they see that we're coming up to them, and if not, their job is to take it to a road so somebody in the United States side can pick it up, and they can pick up the migrant. That's kind of their payment on how that's how they pay for their entry through Mexico.
Yeah,
So
that's insane.
yeah,
But you can't compare, some of my paisas, running across, the
Right.
mountains and then say that that's where most of the drug is coming from. You
Right.
just can't. It's not logical.
Yeah. So they have been using submersibles and small craft since I was in the Navy. So, bit of background: I was in what used to be called a special boat unit, and I was in a riverine unit. So I spent in Central America providing services. And one of the things that we trained on with the Coast Guard specifically was developing methodologies way back when on how to deal with these type of products. The problem is that it's not necessarily that the Coast Guard can't detect, right? The Coast Guard in and of itself is very small, right? But these cartels are able to write off the losses, right? Because what they'll do is they'll say, if one gets caught, they don't care. More importantly, something that the right needs to start figuring out: there are not immigrants waiting to pick up the supply. Those are American citizens on the States of America, or in ports, or in rivers, or in waterways, that go and collect the drugs and then transport them. The fact of the matter is that the vast majority of all drugs that are illegally sent to the United States are transported by U.S. citizens. That's just a simple fact of the matter. And there's really, what we learned in the war on drugs is that it can't really be a war because they're more willing to do things we're not, right? We're not willing to spend money. We're not willing to improve immigration laws, and we're not willing to actually address the problem. With that, because I'm on the West Coast, I have dad duty and husband duty coming up. I want to thank everyone very much. Bobby, Rollo, I'm really looking forward to working with you more. Involved facts, as always. Thank you for allowing me to be up here.
Thank you, buddy.
Mom, Casey, love you. It's awesome.
Me too.
My Tri-Valley homie from the East Bay. And everyone, please continue to tap the screen. Please continue to gift, and I will be listening also very much. Keep the truths out there. Keep the facts out there, and let's really make sure that we appreciate and gift our panelists, because this has been absolutely amazing.
Absolutely.
And for the record, I have 22 and a half pages of written notes. So thank you.
Oh, there you go.
Appreciate you, buddy.
Peace.
Hope
Hey,
you know shorthand.
I wanted to add something to that. So in regards to like the Americans that are picking up the illicit substances or getting the migrants, the problem is it's difficult to charge them, simply because they can just say, well, I was just picking up people on the side of the road and I didn't know them.
Sure.
So the AUSA comes back and looks at the information and says, well, I can't charge them with this. I need actual evidence because this is a criminal situation. 8 USC 1324 is being used, but it's very difficult to charge the drivers. And it's very, it kind of brings down the morale in Border Patrol because they work so hard to track these people. They get into a unaliving situation where they put themselves at risk during these high-speed chases.
Sure.
We apprehend them and then they just go scot-free because they like I said, the cartels are very tricky and they know our laws and they know that, hey, we just picked up some people on the side of the road, so they're not going to be charged with a USC 1324.
Information factual. Thank you for your patience. What's on your mind tonight?
You're good. You're good. No, I don't really. I may have a question between now and then, and I'm just going to say it right now. I always put out this disclaimer because I do have MS. It may make sense in my head. It might not make so much sense coming out of my mouth. So if it doesn't, go ahead and stop me. I won't be offended.
We got you.
I'm medically retired now from the post office at 45 years old due to multiple sclerosis, but I digress. But I was there for 26 years. I was a carrier for 18 and then in management. I'll tell you what, the amount of stuff that gets mailed through the post office, because even as a carrier, like a lot of things you can't smell, like, and I have my wife's uncle. He was a superintendent at a not so safe school, I guess you would say, in an area here in the DFW area. And the kids learned, they were always like, why do all these kids always carry around baby powder? Well, they learned that there are certain things you could stick in baby powder that when they brought the dogs in, it couldn't smell. Like things like booger sugar. But we would get literally there's been times we got huge boxes and then the OIG would come in and somehow it got from where it was coming from in the United States to the post office I was working at. And we couldn't smell it, but they were huge, 50-pound boxes. And the OIG would call and be like, hey, this box it went through every single step and got through however many processing plants from point A to point B until it got to our office. They just let it ride, and they had a tracking number on it. But the thing of it is, even when I was carrying mail, there are things, because people don't know how to pack things that are like the devil's lettuce, that if you don't pack it right, you can't smell it. Me, because I'm an advocate for it, if I got it on my route, I didn't say a damn thing. I delivered it because it wasn't a whole lot. It wasn't a big box. And like I said, I'm medically retired now. They ain't going to stop me from getting my check for saying it. But, and even when I went into management, I'd be walking around and talking to my carriers and stuff, and they would have their gurneys and their big hampers full of, where the clerks had thrown their packages. And I could walk past and be like, yeah, it's in this hamper right here.
Information. Let me just ask you to be mindful of the things that you say.
Right, and that's why I'm trying. I'm trying not to say too much because I know how TikTok is.
That's okay. Do you have a question specifically?
But yeah, no, I was just saying. But I do. I was saying I do. Let me scratch that reverse. A lot of it I know does come through United States Postal Service also. Sure. So it is, it's coming from, they're getting it from somewhere, but it started, it's transported all around here in the United States. Now, like I said, if a carrier were to come to me saying, hey, I had to report it, but otherwise I didn't there are certain things I didn't report.
Right. But, like Rolla was saying earlier, the cartels are motivated. They're going to figure out a way to get their product.
Oh, yeah.
Because the appetite, the consumer's appetite in America is pretty high.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And and I'll say myself, I've been to Colorado. I know how it works.
Sure.
And
sure.
I got to, we know how to get it from point A to point B.
That's right. That's right.
And it be okay. But yeah, and you guys are doing a great job, and I really appreciate this. And I'm actually recording this so I can share it with Miss T. And
awesome. I appreciate that.
But yeah, so I do appreciate it, and thank you very much. But yeah, that's all I wanted to say, that because that's one thing that people seem to think, that everything comes across the border. No, actually, the Postal Service delivers a lot of everything.
Through rain, snow, sleet, devil's lettuce.
Oh, devil's lettuce, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Yeah, you name it.
Thank you.
It's in a box.
Thank you, Fred. We appreciate you.
All right, you have a great one. Thank you.
You too. Thanks.
Has anybody seen that show, To Catch a Smuggler?
I have.
And that has been the most informative show for me, to get perspective.
What happened? There we go. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's been a great helping hand.
So can we shift gears a little bit and start talking a little bit about solutions? We know that early days of the Biden administration, there was an intensive plan to address the border. We know that right now that there's a lot of back and forth. Like you both addressed, there doesn't seem to be a significant appetite to solve the problem. It just seems like we continue to kick it down the road a little bit. So from your perspective, guys, what's a reasonable approach to this? I know, Rollo, you talked about it from three categories: economic, family reunification, and humanitarian. I think, Bobby, I think from our conversations, it seems like you kind of agree with, at least from a high level perspective. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but so from each of your perspectives, what are things that we could talk about reasonably? Because I know we can't solve it all tomorrow. What would be a good approach to address some of our challenges that we have?
Well, from my perspective, law enforcement side, we definitely need more Border Patrol agents. But if you don't pass a bill, then what are we going to do? They need to entice people to want to not only pick up and move wherever they're from, and they got to move to a border town where there may be only 500 people that live there.
Sure.
Not a lot of people are willing to do that type of job. It is a very dangerous job, but it is well paid. So there are some incentives. So one, I think we need more Border Patrol agents. So that way, anybody that comes through our deserts, we can actually locate them for a humanitarian reason and an immigration reason. They get themselves into trouble, and we need to go out there and help them, right? So we also need to change our mindset about how we look at migrants. If we look at them as an enemy or an invader, I don't think that's the right course to take. When we're dealing with migrants and you interview them, you'll know by interviewing them that they're not our enemies, right? They're here to just make a better living for their families, and that's it. For the most part, there are some bad people that come across. So one, I would say more patrol agents, maybe increase the amount of technology that we have. The second thing, and Rollo may disagree with me from his perspective as a lawyer, I think we need more immigration judges to kind of expedite the process of getting asylum, and then either removing them if they're bad people, we do need to remove them. So we need more oversight in that, and we definitely need more judges. As far as the illicit substances are concerned, that's a supply and demand issue.
Sure.
And I think that if Americans are demanding it, the cartel's going to figure out a way to get it in, whether it's through the mail, through submarines, through backpacks, whatever the case may be, they're going to figure out a way. So we need to do something about our own population, so that way there is no demand for that type of stuff. So
fair enough. Appreciate that, Bobby. Rollo?
I'm taking a very drastic approach to the solutions.
Sure.
I think the immigration reform needs to be inside out, upside down, through and through, right? The more I understand immigration law, the more devastated I am about how the immigration law works, because none of it is geared to allow a streamlined process to let people into the country the right way. A lot of conservatives, they always say, why don't they do it the right way?
Exactly.
And that is like their main pony on basically not wanting people to come in at all. When I hear do it the right way, I hear don't come in.
Don't come at all.
Because,
exactly.
Yeah, don't come at all, because there is no right way to do it, right? If you look at the visa programs, if I wanted to ask as a US citizen, if I wanted to petition for my brother, he would be an F4 category. And if I was from Mexico, my brother would have to wait close to 30 to 40 years in order for a visa to become available for him to come to the US.
30 to 40 years?
Yes, sir. Right now, they are processing visas that were entered back in 1996 or 97 from Mexico, right? Now, just because there's a 20-something year backlog doesn't mean that they're going to be processed in 20-something years. It could take 2 to 3 years to process 1 year worth of visas or more. Does that make sense? So if you make the math, you are waiting for decades in order to come in the right way. If I'm very well educated and I want to come work here, I still have to fight an uphill battle to come here. The only viable way to come into the US is if I marry a US citizen and if I don't have any barriers to entry, right? A lot of people talk about anchor babies, and that is very offensive and stupid to me because if I entered, like Bobby was saying, iwi, entered without inspection, meaning I didn't come in here with a visa, I just crossed the border. I have a baby in the US. People say, well, as long as when they turn 21 years, they can ask for me, right? Not right. The laws does not allow for a child to petition their parents for legal citizenship or permanent legal status if they didn't enter legally to the US, right? So that's out the window. The only way that a child can petition a parent is if the parent entered with a visa or has some form of legal entry, some kind of parole, something where there's a legal entry, right? If I want to do it the right way, let's say I come here, I overstay for a year, and I'm like, hey, I want to go back to my country and then come in the right way. The problem is that after 1997, April 1st of 1997, they passed a law that if I have illegal presence for over 1 year and then I leave the country, I automatically have a 10-year bar where I can't come back in, right? If I try to come back in, that turns into a lifetime bar. So even if I wanted to do it the right way, leave the country and come back the right way, I can't do it for 10 years. There are some waivers that you can apply if you're married a U.S. citizen, if you don't have a lifetime bar. So every way that you see the INA and how it works, it is 100% designed to keep as many brown people out of the country as possible, right? That's how I see it. So my approach would be you do away with the INA and then you come up with something that is much more comprehensive. And I would prioritize it the way I said, economic base. So if we need workers, more or less, there has to be a leeway, and there can't be really a limit, a hard limit on visas, right? And then family based. If I need to ask for my parents, for my children, my siblings, and doing away with the 10-year bars, 3-year, 2-year, 10-year bar. Those were designed to prevent people from coming in and dissuade people from coming in. So I'll give you a quick example. Before 1997, a lot of migrant workers came to the US, they worked for the summer, and then they went back to Mexico, to Guatemala, wherever, right? And then the next year, they came back for the work season, went in through the border, worked, and then they went back. Past 1997, I can't do that anymore. So now I'm staying, right? And then I go back to my country. And then now people that are coming in are now staying, something that we didn't want people to stay in the US, right? So if you allow people legal citizenship, legal residency in the US, I would immediately grant some kind of amnesty, right? For everyone who's here, undocumented, and then make it right. I guarantee you that over half the people that gain legal citizenship, what would be their first item of business on their list? I guarantee they go back to their countries.
Sure.
And some may stay over there, or at least do a 50-50 split. Does that make sense?
It does. So question on that, because the way you described the refugee process earlier, it seemed like it was a lot less complicated, much more simple. Obviously, coming from a war-torn area or whatever that might be is a horrible circumstance, but it seems like the refugee process is much simpler. So are you saying that the asylum and or gaining citizenship should be something closer to the refugee process than it is to the current asylum process, if that makes sense?
It does. I don't know if it's simpler because you have to go through similar steps, but outside of the country, right? So
Okay.
they're still getting vetted 2, 3, 4, 5 years outside they're even allowed to come in. That makes sense?
Gotcha.
And not
Gotcha.
everyone gets approved. Look, I'm a little bit extreme, but who was able to come to the US, go to a little place called Ellis Island, sign their names, and now they're legal citizens?
My grandparents.
Thank you. Right?
Yeah.
Why can't we provide something like that for new immigrants? A little bit more melanin. I don't have that much, but a little more melanin in their skin tones.
Sure.
Why isn't that available? Why isn't
think
there a process where people can legally come either through work visas,
Yeah.
visitor visas, through family visas, and open it up so that we can regulate it, and then allow them to come in.
I think the one of the biggest reasons why our immigration our system has slowed down a little bit is specifically because of 9/11. Prior to 9/11,
Sure.
we didn't have as stringent checks that we have now. And when you add that component to it, which is I think is very important to have, we have to vet each person uh, to the max. We have to look into their background. And when you get hundreds of thousands of people that we have to look into their background for, it takes time because we don't want another 9/11 to happen or any other incident in the future. So I think that's another confounding thing that we got to look at and add that into the puzzle, right? Because it's a very difficult situation. It's not just black and white. You got to think about what happened in 9/11.
So
But
okay,
they
that
also
makes
use that.
sense.
Sorry, I think they also use that just to stop more brown people from coming in.
Sure.
Because none of them came in through the southern border, but it's definitely a talking point, to stop that from happening. I would push back. I forgot what I was gonna say. Go ahead. I'll come back later.
I was gonna ask. So it seems like both of you are. I think Bobby wants to approach it from the processing perspective, basically working within the system that we have now. Rollo, you want to blow the whole thing up. So I get it. So
In a very
compromise.
orderly fashion.
Fair enough. So something you said earlier, and when we talked the last time, you talked about regular and irregular border crossings. So what I'm trying to understand is, I think you said it's USC code 1325, which is basically unlawful entry. Is that the
Yeah.
correct one? So does that apply to anybody, even if they cross through a regular? It's only those that cross irregularly?
No, it depends.
Okay.
It depends on the instructions from the AUSA and who's going to be amenable.
Assistant U.S. Attorney? Is that what that is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So AUSA is going to hand down that policy. We enforce whatever the AUSA wants us and how they want it to enforce. We're not lawyers. We're not the ones that interpret the law. We just basically apply it to certain situations. So how they're doing it exactly right now, I'm not sure. What I do know is that they're using Title 8 as opposed to the Title 42.
Okay, fair enough.
I think to clarify that, if I present myself at a port of entry, I can't legally be charged with illegal entry, right? Because I presented myself to a port of entry. So there, I am immune from the 8 USC 1325 because I don't have an illegal entry by an alien. I presented myself for inspection, and then I was let in. So
Gotcha.
It defeats it.
And then the clock starts, like you said, that 1 year. That clock starts when you make that claim.
When I file my I-589.
Got it. Okay.
But I will tell you though that if they had a previous order of removal, and if they've had that in their packet already, I can give them a reinstate, which is 8 USC 1326. So remember, we're talking about the bars, right? So if they do have a bar, which is 5 years, 10 years, or 20 years, and then they present themselves to the port of entry, I can remove them.
Okay.
Yeah, and I guess I will be talking first-time entrants, right?
Right. Yeah.
First-time asylum seekers. That's what we're having.
Got it. Thank you, Sash. Thank you for your patience. Did you have a question for our panelists this evening?
Hello. Thank you, Fax, for having me up, welcoming me up.
Sure.
Rollo, I've been following you for a while. I don't think we've ever formally met. And then Bobby, we met just yesterday. Turns out that we are from the same hometown, so.
Cool.
But yeah, so since we're talking about solutions, I just wanted to bring up something and see how you all felt about it. U.S. Rep Gabe Vasquez, he's from New Mexico. He's from Las Cruces, and he introduced the Supporting Our Workforce Act, and it's a package of 5 immigration and border bills. Of course, it wasn't really taken seriously, but there are a lot of people on the left introducing bills that are addressing the issue. And to know how you all felt about it. And one of them was called the Stop the Coyote Suppression and Organized Trafficking and Ensuring Safety Act, which is called the Coyotes Act. And it goes after the coyotes and the cartels who continue to harm, human traffic, sexually assault, SA and unalive migrant women and children. A second one is the Smart Border Protection Act, which ensures public safety and economic opportunity in our border communities with smart tech and improved port of entry infrastructure. I'm sorry, that's my daughter in the back.
It's okay.
The third one is the Humane Accountability Act, which aims to hold detention centers accountable to protect detainees who experience injuries, SA, and things of that nature. And then the last one is the Farm Workforce Support Act, which aims to create a pathway to H-2A visas for farm workers who sustain our agricultural industry. I just wanted to know what do you think about some solutions like that? And then the second thing I wanted to ask is, since we've had a few lawyers up here already, I wanted to know if Bobby, if you're familiar with the Las Americas Immigrant Advocacy Center.
I am
Here,
not.
you're not
No,
here in
no.
El Paso. It's a nonprofit organization that has that helps immigrants that don't have really monetary access to attorneys, to immigration attorneys. And anytime I get the chance, I like to see, especially if there's attorneys, present, that they take volunteers. Anybody in the chat, or anybody that is able to volunteer their time or anything like that. It's here in the El Paso Juarez border region. If you would like to volunteer your time, they would love anything like that. Again, it's the Las Americas Immigrant Advocacy Center.
I think that's a good point, because a lot of the migrants I come into contact with when I was in Border Patrol, they usually ask for a lawyer, right? The ones that know about it, they do get pro bono lawyers, but the more the merrier. So if there are other immigration lawyers, Rolo, they definitely need more help, definitely. Because I tell you what, from the processing perspective, I promise you this: there are some migrants, their rights are violated, and they don't even realize it while they're at the station. They're
Sure.
signing documentation. They have no idea what they're signing. They just think that, hey, this is the authority figure, and I need to do what they tell me to do. And that's where Rolo and other immigration lawyers should step in and say, hey, you can't do this. That's not right.
Well, speaking of like their rights being violated, like with Greg Abbott busing migrants and Ron DeSantis flying them and so forth, like what do we think about that? Like
I
as
think it's
far as
petty.
like violating immigrants.
It's just petty. Yeah, well, I mean, I think I don't know the status of the people on the buses. Have you guys done your homework on that? I don't know if are they asylum seekers already?
They're asylum seekers.
Asylum seekers, yeah.
So they're already asylum seekers. So
Correct.
The ones that went to Florida were found in San Antonio as asylum seekers.
Well, it's counterproductive for him, because he's giving them what they want to further themselves inside the United States, one. And then
Sure.
two, it's very petty. It's very political. It's just petty. And I am not on board with that. I think they have a right to go to their home of record when they come to Border Patrol. They usually have a home of record. That's where they should go, not to wherever they're sending them.
Well, a lot of people are asking if it's human smuggling. Like, is it considered human trafficking or?
Right.
I mean, I hope that they can do
Kidnapping.
some kind of legal recourse for like T visas, which would be trafficking.
Sure.
But I don't know.
Sure.
I don't know.
Well, the ones that went to Florida were given false pretenses. Like the ones that left from Texas, the Texas governor made them sign documents so that they couldn't come back and like prosecute him or whatever. But the ones that went to Martha's Vineyard were given false pretenses, like promise of job, promise of money, promise of housing, and all that.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
There's
I have
an
a follow
argument
up.
for T visas there.
I would agree. I have a follow up on that question. I want to make sure that you guys address Sasha's question regarding specifically the Senate bill and bills that were passing through Congress. Are you familiar enough with them to have an opinion on them, or what are your thoughts on the question that she asked about that legislation?
I take a pragmatic. I mean, I know I said I want to blow everything up facts, but that's just me being facetious, you know?
That's all. Hey, man, that might be what it takes. I mean, seriously, that might be what it takes.
But I mean, I support almost any legislation that is going to help at least certain groups of immigrants, right?
Sure.
What I don't support is legislation that will trade the status of a small group to a larger group. If you look at the Trump, he tried to pass some immigration reform. I think it was 2018. It was called the Race Act. One of the things that he did is he basically traded DACA recipients, about 800,000, and made it a very long process for them to become legal. But then they couldn't petition for their parents. They couldn't. It would affect a much larger amount of people, so that they couldn't adjust. You know. So in my opinion, at that point, if I was a legislator, I would be hell no. I'm not gonna trade 800,000 DACA recipients, even though we want them to have something, for an exchange of 4 to 8 to 10 million, undocumented folk. I'm just not going to do that. With these things that you talked about, Sash, I think they're good. They're like baby steps, and if they pass, I mean, is that what it's going to take to get some kind of Republican support? And if so, is it really, I mean, they're not willing to do anything, right? Right now, there's a Senate bill. I think it's like SB 115 or something like that. I was trying to find it. But it basically talks about the registry. If in the US, you can prove that you've been here since 1972, you can pretty much fill out a form and then you become a US legal resident and then a US citizenship. What they're trying to do is move up that date. I think it's like to 2017. So you can just register if you can prove that you've been here continuously without crimes, at least 7 years in the US and all that. Up to like 2017, I think is where the countdown goes. Then you can basically sign up to be a US resident. And that would affect about 8 to 10 million people who are here without proper documentation. And that's a pretty good bill. But who has signed up for it? Nobody, right? We know that the Democrats passed in the House really good immigration reform. It passed the House, but it died in the Senate because we need 60 votes in the Senate in order to pass any type of immigration reform as a law. And we don't even have one Republican that would sign on to it. And even some of our Democrats are like iffy, right? We have at least two that we can't count on.
Right.
So I do support all, even if it's baby steps. I'm like, yeah, great. Let's help as many people as possible, even if we can't do anything right now.
Progress.
Some people are more extreme. They're like all or nothing. So, bust the whole system. We don't want any type of immigration reform unless we get the whole thing. And I think the opposite. I think anything that will help at least small amounts of people. The ones that you mentioned, Sash, were like very specific, right? To like people who did this or work in certain fields and do that.
Mm-hmm.
In Spanish, me están dando atol con el dedo, They're just feeding me, but with their
fingertip, sure.
Atol con el dedo. And to me, it's not satiating. I think we need something more aggressive.
Did that answer your question, Sash?
Yes, I think it was more like, I think he's just speaking to his specific community. So like here in the border with Las Cruces, El Paso, and Juarez. I think that's basically where he's trying to specifically address. But no, I agree with you. Es un poco a poco, just little by little, just to try to get something passed, just because right now really nothing. And it's frustrating,
And that's exactly the type of attitude that really drives the Hispanic population away from certain politicians.
Sure,
right?
Agreed.
They say, oh, Democrats, they promise everything, they never deliver. Obviously, they don't go to the deeper analysis that even if the Democrats try, it's blocked by Republicans.
That's right.
But at a simple view, oh, los demócratas prometen y nunca nos dan nada. They promise and they never give us anything. At least the Republicans never promise anything. So we're going to vote Republican, which to me is like mind-boggling.
Yeah.
I'm going to vote for someone who doesn't promise me anything versus someone who's trying to help me but can't because of the opposite side.
That's
But
a good perspective. Yeah, that's
yes,
the reality.
there's
Thank
a
you,
lot of
Sash.
people that think that way.
Thank you, Sash, for jumping in tonight. Really appreciate you.
Thank you
Thank you very
too. Thank
much.
you for having me. I'll keep
You got it. Have a
listening.
good
Thank you,
night.
Sash.
Appreciate you.
You too.
So here's another question I have for you. So we know that that border states receive federal monies to help with their own state security, or whatever you want to call it. When we see the situation that Ron DeSantis and Greg Abbott did when they put migrants in planes or on buses, but the money, conveniently enough, didn't travel with those people who were shipped. So what's that process like? Is it what's the how can you guys speak to, is it a per capita? Is it a per crossings? What's the determination for how much federal money goes to border states? And then what happens to it if it doesn't get used properly? If either one of you can answer that question.
That I couldn't speak to.
Okay.
I do know is that when I was Border Patrol, we did have money set aside for the sheriff's office in our town.
Okay.
It wasn't allocated money that was given to that specific region. And we basically gave money to the sheriff's office to help patrol the area. But again, they didn't have any immigration authority. All they did was help maybe apprehend, and then they would basically move it back over to Border Patrol. So it does help in a way, because they were out there helping migrants trying to find them if they're lost.
Okay.
There's a lot of money that's being spent over to the sheriff's office, for example, and now the state troopers, right? They don't have authority either because all they can do is give them trespassing warnings.
Right.
That's all they're doing. So I see it as kind of a waste of money, if you ask me.
Fair enough. All right. So
Yeah,
let's go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I know that there's federal funds allocated specifically for the handling of immigrants coming in for in the state border towns, state border states. And when you grab these people and then take them to like New York, that they don't have that funding, right? They take the people but not the money, and that's when it creates crisis, and that's exactly done on purpose for political reasons.
Yeah.
To say, hey, look at Chicago, look at New York, they have all these problems because of migrants. But again, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and it's something that has been planned by DeSantis and Abbott to
And Abbott.
create that havoc so that they can have a political football.
Right.
And that's what's upsetting.
Okay, so then, with the exception of Title 42, because obviously that was that was used. Whether we could debate that all day. Whether it was.
I gotta go take care of my kids.
Thanks, Chelsea. Appreciate you, buddy.
Thanks for having me, guys. I
You got
will
it.
follow both
It's
of
awesome.
you. Awesome.
Thank you, friend. Appreciate you.
Thank you, political moms.
So has anything significantly changed in our border policies in the last 20, 30, 40 years? So again, that's another talking point, right, that we have to push back against about how it's all of a sudden it's changed. We already discussed the open border situation. It's not. We already discussed the some of the talking points and some of the narratives that come out. We know that they've been debunked. We try our best, but so from either one of your perspectives, nothing has significantly changed in the last 30, 40 years, or since INA, I guess. Is that a fair statement?
I can only speak in terms of my dealings with Border Patrol, almost a decade. In that decade, I can tell you that nothing's really changed. The only time that changed law-wise was we used Title 42.
Right.
And I can speak all day about that. And all I'm going to tell you is that that's just a revolving door.
Gotcha.
There's no charges on it. They go back to make something back, and it just causes more problems. But no, if the right wants to say that Biden is not using the laws appropriately, that's not correct.
Gotcha.
Title 8 is a good title to use for now. Until we do what Rolo says, we need to revamp the entire system. And we can only wait until Congress gets off their ass and do something about it.
Well said. Anything from your perspective on that, Rolo?
Yeah, so as far as laws, they're very lethargic. They haven't changed. What has changed is something very specific called prosecutorial discretion.
Right.
Right. So under Trump, he held on to U.S.C. 1325 and charged everyone with that code so that he could take them in as criminal defendants
Yeah.
Therefore, he could take away their kids because kids can't be detained in jails.
Zero
And
tolerance.
yeah, and that's called the zero tolerance policy.
Yeah.
So a lot of like conservatives applaud,
Mm,
Trump is being hard on the border. He's just being inhumane and he's violating
gotcha.
the Flores Agreement. He's doing a lot of really bad things, right? So the way that each administration is going to enforce the same laws that are written is purely based on prosecutorial discretion, and sometimes that works in our favor, and a lot of times it works against us.
Sure, in a lot of cases like that, obviously one of the responsibilities of the chief executive, the president in our country, is to appoint judges. So, like you said earlier, oftentimes it's a coin flip, the type of judge that you get, whether they're sympathetic to the situation or if they're not. And like you said, Bobby, that you've got border agents that are wearing their political affiliations, violating law.
Yeah.
They're not supposed to be doing those things. So that makes sense. Guys, this has been absolutely incredible. I want to thank you both for giving us 3 hours and some of the great questions. I apologize for people that are in the request box that haven't been able to come up. But anything that you, either one of you or both of, please, if there's, what would you like to say in closing tonight? Bobby, why don't you start?
Hey, look, the immigration policies that are the issues that we're having is highly political. It's being used right now, especially think about it. We're in a presidential election in 2024. One side is going to use it against the other side as a political point, but that doesn't mean that we don't have a problem at the border. People on the left-hand side don't deny that there's an influx, but you got to understand where that influx is coming from. Today, I think we gave you an understanding of what the laws are and what causes bigger groups, stemming all the way back from the time that Trump stated there's going to be a wall that's going to be built. Scaring, it's a scare tactic, and that's actually when it started. So just keep that in mind. It is a political move. But at the same time, we still have a problem at the border, and we do need to make some changes. That's all.
Well said. Thank you, Bobby. Rollo?
Yeah, no, I just want to say, thank everyone for coming here and listening. I think the most efficient way to fight misinformation is with providing factual, unbiased information. I have tried my best to provide unbiased information and factual information. Everything that I said, you can double check me, fact check me, and make sure that I'm walking the straight and narrow when it comes to the facts. And if people get educated and if they want to open their minds to real information, they will understand, like Bobby says, yes, there's a lot of problems. The system is broken and we need to work together to fix it. Not as a political pawns, immigrants, that's what they make us, political pawns, but to really look at this in a very objective way to try to end the problems with humanitarian issues, immigration, and also all of the different factors that really make the whole system broken down. So that's what I'm asking. Let's keep the conversation going. I know it's going to be a very hot topic, especially this year. And the more misinformation we fight, the more people can understand the process and get educated. I think the more people can make the right choice coming in November.
Well said, guys. Well said. I mean, I think you're right. You're absolutely right. This is a conversation that we need to continue to have. And I want to again thank you both for giving a few hours tonight. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you, mods. I know you guys were busy tonight for sure. And then thank you for everybody for gifting our panelists. I want to shout out to Anthony and to Political Mom and to all of our guests tonight. Thank you guys again very, very much. I would encourage everybody to take Rollo's advice and to take Bobby's advice. There's a lot of information that's out there, and there's lots of resources for people who truly want to get the right answers. And these two guys are great, and I'm sure that they would appreciate the follow. Thank you all very much again. Have a great night. Be well, everybody.
Thank you.